To talk to you about the FY26 budget today. Today is budget day. Just want to talk a little bit through some of the materials you have in front of you, and then Mr. Fulmer will lead our presentation to talk through where we are. So in front of you, you do have a copy of the slides, also included in board docs, and in hard copy, we have the budget summary. That's the large piece of paper here in front of you, the budget summary. And then we also included just a sample of the proposed FY26 teacher scale, so you could take a look at that and what that could potentially look like as we have conversation today. So with that, I'll turn things over to Mr. Fulmer.
All right, we'll run through kind of presentation, and then we can jump into the documents if you have specific questions, but a lot of what's in the presentation will mirror what you have in the budget summary in front of you. As we all know, the governor did act on May 2nd, and as far as K-12 education goes, we remain fully intact with that General Assembly budget. That was the budget that was included in your school board's approved budget for state revenue, and that was an increase over last year of just shy of $18.9 million. And that was our best case scenario for the state. And then on the county side, what was in the county administrator's budget was a $5 million increase. On April 15th, when the Board of Supervisors discussed the budget, they approved that $5 million increase, and then additionally, they are having a public hearing on May 20th with the intention of increasing the meals tax and the intention of providing that funding to the schools to help the school division bring our salaries up to where the local government had their salary proposal at. So that would be an additional $3.1 million. It brings our total increase of our local transfer from last year to this year to 8.1. So to be clear, right now in the county's budget, it is just a $5 million increase, but everything that's been shared with us and their intent from the meeting on April 15th was that the meals tax and that additional $3.1 million would come to the school division. And we've heard nothing kind of to the contrary of that, or to think that we should not proceed forward with that full $8.1 million increase.
So are we waiting on questions? Yes, you wanna get through everything?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
hold questions.
Not questions, comments.
I just wrote mine down.
Okay.
So going back to this slide that we presented a few weeks ago, we had 4 different scenarios, kind of our worst case and our best case. Really just highlighting here that we did end up with our best case scenario as far as the state budget and the additional funding that's expected from local government. So there were a couple other small tweaks that I want to point out that are now included in our local revenue. We'll talk about this a little bit, but in the county's budget was an additional $265,000 of revenue for our day school transfer. Additionally, since our last meeting, we also actually, I think, finalizing the purchase of Blackjack Road today. So the county approved that last week at their board meeting. And that not only saves money on the expenditure side, but it also generates a rental income for the occupant that's in the back of that building that has about 3 years left on that lease. So that was over $38,000 in additional revenue, so I wanted to work that into the budget as well.
Is that per year?
I'm sorry. Per year, yes ma'am.
Can we take that money, or does they have to go to the county first and then, I mean, do we have to do something weird with the money?
No, it'll be appropriated and we can spend it like everything else.
Okay, good. I just know that
So,
sometimes there are
yep.
weird rules.
So we look back to your school board adopted budget, your approved budget was at $484.8 million. Our adjusted revenue now is at a little over $488 million. So that's a $3.4 million increase over what you had in your school board approved budget. But your expenditures in your school board approved budget were $503 million. So we still had roughly a $15 million funding gap even with those additional revenues. So,
To be clear, we still have a $15 million funding gap.
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanna make sure that we understand what we're shorting the system by not being more whatever. I'm not gonna, it's the morning time, so I'll save my words. But to be clear, we are still operating at a $15 million deficit essentially.
Yes.
Okay.
So how do we approach closing that $15 million deficit? Obviously, a big chunk of our budget, or in the school board's budget, was our discretionary spend for compensation. This doesn't get into the dollars necessarily, but it does get into the proposal of what we are asking the school board to approve for salaries for next year. You'll see really our theme here is once again is One Stafford, and so we are trying to align with what the Board of Supervisors are offering their employees and honoring the $3.1 million additional funds from local government. And that really was the intent of the Board of Supervisors that approved that or set to approve that. The guidance we received really was to try to move up our minimum of 1.5% that we have to do to get the state funding to try to get us up to that 2.7, 2.75 that the local government is offering their employees. So public safety will get 2.75% on their anniversary date. So it's a little different than all their other employees and our employees. So every year, that's not new to them, that's every year they actually move up their step, they get that percentage on their anniversary date. All other county employees are getting 2.75%, but it is on January 1st. And they do have a few $100,000 allocated in their budget to correct some market pay studies and a pay review. They've had 2 different studies over the last few years, and so this is kind of closing out those studies that were out there. It's not huge dollar amounts, it doesn't appear to be huge percentages across the board for all their employees, it's just a few folks that are out of market. From what I've heard, it's predominantly some utility workers. So our proposal on our end, which assumes that 1% meals tax increase, is we started on our license scale that we wanted to do the 2.5% minimum. But also realizing we wanted to get closer to that 2.7, 2.75 that the Board of Supervisors has. Now their 2.75 is a mid-year increase, we're proposing a 2.7%, and we got there by $100 on the base of the teacher scale, which does work its way up the scale, and then a 2.5% on top of that. So that $100 and that 2.5% brings it up to 2.7% across the board for all of our licensed service scale or licensed employees. On top of that, there will be, the state is fully funding it, and that'll be a discussion today and then on the board agenda for tonight. The state proposed a $1,000 bonus for all SOQ funded positions, but as you know, we have more positions than just SOQ positions, and the state gave flexibility to the school divisions so that you can reduce below the $1,000 so that you can still fully fund the bonus and allocate it across all employees. One of the things we'll talk about in a little while is right now the way that's worded, even on the school board agenda, is $700 and $350 for a 0.5 employee. That will be prorated. So if you're a 0.75 or a 0.6, we do have varying contracts, especially with like our school nutrition or some bus drivers. So we will prorate that. One of the things that, we'll get into it in a minute on how that $700 might vary, and so we'll get some feedback from the board there. On our service scale, we're doing a 2.7% across the board. And then additionally, the 1% bonus. So kind of in summary, all of our employees will have a 2.7% increase from last year to this year, or this year going into next year. And the proposal for the $700 one-time bonus, retention bonus, or prorated for part-time employees. Questions just on salaries?
I just want to make a note for this slide, if we could put some type of a footnote that part-time will be prorated, because the way this looks, it looks as if 350 is if you're anything less than full-time. So
Okay.
just so people understand that, I'm glad to hear that it's prorated, but I think this might be misunderstood.
Okay, thank you. And I think in our board docs item, I think we have that specified out, but we can adjust it here as well.
Well, if it's in the, what's going out to the public, that's fine.
Okay, all right, thanks. So now just an overall expenditure summary, so, with that reduction across the board down to a 2.7%, that's about $13.5 million in savings over what was in your school board approved budget. We are, with the additional public day school money, we do have to add 1.5 FTEs, as part of that MOU. That's a cost of about $150,000. Well, we are proposing, as we've gotten farther along in the year, we were moving approximately 4 FTEs in from the grants fund into the operating. We can leave one of them in our grants fund for another year, so we're actually, that 128 isn't a reduction of that position, but it's actually moving it back into title funding for next year. We were awarded and got notice a few weeks ago of the Claude Moore grant that we can fund basically 0.4, roughly half of our Brook Point Specialty Center lead with that for next year. So that's reducing 52,000, about a half a teacher FTE over to the Claude Moore grant. We are reducing our support position that was in the budget for technology of 104,000. That was 1 FTE. We are proposing to leave our ESOL coordinator due to the growth that we've had there. That was really the only 2 support positions we had included in the budget. Identified some software reductions of working with the department of 110,000. Dual enrollment fees of 176,000 reduction. Fuel is 300,000 reduction, and that is, we had already built in $150,000, and the superintendent's and the school board's approved budget. That 300 is in addition to that, and actually presented to the FABC just last week, I believe, and it's on the agenda for tonight in the kind of third quarter year-end update as we're projecting through the end of the year. We're doing really well with fuel savings this year, so this isn't eliminating all of the potential savings there, but I think we can reduce that a little bit more. And as I mentioned, Blackjack Road property, we are purchasing that. The lease there is 125,000, but even in our kind of cash flow estimates, break-even analysis, we said let's leave $10,000 for maintenance, utilities, so we have lease savings of 125, but only reducing it by 115 at this point. And as we have a full year, maybe we adjust that a little bit, we see a little bit more savings next year. And then additional salary lapse of 500. And that is another thing that we'll talk about, that we've seen the savings this year already as we move forward. And I don't think, we've had a lot of success the last few years of improving our teacher scale and some great success with teacher retention and recruitment. I still think we'll be okay, but I don't know if we'll see the same rates that we have the last few years. So we used to be $3 million a year that we budgeted for salary lapse. We, a couple of years ago, reduced that to 1.75, so this is just bringing it back up to 2.25, so not the full $3 million. And that would get us down to an adjusted expenditure total that matches our revenue. I know I already talked about some of these, but this is just a little bit more of the breakdown of what those departmental reductions are. Want to touch on the dual enrollment fees. So that was a per the state now, Germanna in our case, or whatever community college or college that the division works with, will be covering the cost of all of our students' dual enrollment fees. Right now, our students paid, but our cost that we were incurring was for our economically disadvantaged students or somebody facing a financial hardship. We would help cover those costs. So now, with that being fully covered at the state level, we don't have to cover any of those costs. So that's about $176,000 in savings that with what we had budgeted and we're incurring in this current year. And I think I touched on the rest. Just quickly on the software. This is some of these are kind of like software and resources. Now, in one of those instances, it's actually, we have a free partnership now with UMW for some grants, resources, and software. And so working with Dr. Shutt's department, feel that we can reduce a software resource they had that assisted them with grant writing and some pursuing a lot of the grants that we've been able to achieve. So we're able to get that resource or a similar resource free now through a UMW partnership that we had. Looking at those grant positions, they had a coordinator of professional learning, moving that back into Title IV, and then also I mentioned about a half an FTE, or sorry, Title II. It's up there as Title II, but I don't know, the .4 got me, so not Title IV, Title II, apologize. Thanks, Patrick, for your signaling there. So it's not a reduction of that position, but more of a moving it back into the grants fund, now that we are, believe we have that carryover funding and funding for next year. I mentioned that specialty center lead for our medical pathways there at Brook Point. We're awarded that Claude Moore grant, so that's a total of $180,000 or about 1.4 FTEs. And I'm actually, Patrick, if you can just kind of talk us through these couple of slides. So we are making some adjustments to FTEs that net out to 0, but just wanted to draw some attention to them.
Sure, and I'll do this at a relatively high level since I know that we have had some conversation that got into the deeper detail. I'll note that the process that we have gone through on this is something that we do every single year. Where as we go through the spring, we use the additional information that we have to try to target where the needs are for the budgeted positions that we have, identify if there are positions that may be greater than what was originally needed, identify areas where we may have lesser needs than what was originally part of the superintendent's funding proposal, the board's approved budget, to ensure that we're putting our resources in the place where they're going to have the most impact for students and align with our own staffing standards and the state's SAQ staffing requirements. In this case, because there's been a lot of attention on things this year, we wanted to show our work a little bit more to explain some of the things that we looked at. Again, this is not something that's new. Even before the board adopted staffing standards and staffing was handled by different departments, they went through a similar process each year on this. I was just highlighting here that some of the things that influenced how we looked at things. So this is looking at actual enrollment as of late April, both in our elementary schools that are part of the K-3 class size reduction program at the state, looking at our actual student enrollment for students requiring level 2 special education services compared to our February projections, looking at our actual English learner enrollment compared to those February projections. And this year, we had an additional factor of getting clarity from the state about how they were treating English learners. As we've said previously, this is the state's first year implementing new standards where the proficiency level of students influence the amount of state funding and state expectations of staffing. So some grace to the state as they are learning what questions they need to answer as well. But some of that information only came to us in March. So all of that information was put together to reassess what amount of staffing we thought was necessary to meet both state requirements as well as the local staffing standards that were planned to be implemented in this year's budget. And you'll see the summary here that in that analysis we identified that there were 8.5 positions originally proposed for ESOL that we no longer felt were necessary to meet the state requirements for the local staffing standard based on, again, updated state guidance and updated enrollment projection. However, we did see 2 areas where there was additional staffing that would be necessary to honor the same standards that were part of the board's approved budget in level 2 special education at a couple of schools, and then in 1 grade each at 3 schools that participate in the class size reduction program to proactively get ahead of compliance in that area, so that in areas where we think we would need a teacher to remain in compliance, we have the opportunity to hire the teacher as opposed to adding that classroom in August when we're not likely to find a teacher.
Do you have a summary page that shows us the actual FTEs that we're adding?
So there is a 1-pager that you have, a hard copy around the class size reduction piece, is that?
Yes, and Ms. Ely, that was your request, we broke down what this looked like for this class
No,
size.
I want to ask for it with respect to the Title I discussion we're gonna have.
Correct, yeah, they're factored into that.
My question is, how many people are we adding for next year? Like, how many paras, how many, because you gave us a sheet during budget that showed us who
Just
we were.
total FTEs.
Mhm.
Yeah, and flavor, like,
Sure.
are we talking classroom teachers, are we talking paras, are we talking bus drivers? How many people are we actually adding to our budget?
Sure, so that is actually unchanged from the February approved budget, so as you can see, like, all of this nets out. This is just about moving where things are within what was in the approved budget, so I don't have that in front of me, but I'm sure that that's something we do
I think it was
have.
125 is what was in there, and now we've reduced the technology support position, so, 124. Because the other ones were not, we're taking them away from the operating fund, a few of those grant positions are just shifting over to the grant, so as far as the FTE count changes from your school board approved budget.
But, but to the point of the flavor of the positions, it would really look the same as it did in the position summary that was in the approved budget that's published, in the published version online.
Yeah,
Is that
because these
right?
are all just
Cool.
teacher
Teacher
adjustments,
Yeah.
just between different types of teachers.
So, I mean, this makes it look like we're doing some cutting, but really, we are adding
Right.
quite a few staff for next year.
We're
We are-
cutting
Right.
ESL, but we're adding other.
Right.
Right, and
needs.
there are others we're adding besides these, right?
Mhm.
These are just, this is
Yes.
just the ESOL
These were just the
and
changes from
changes, it does
From the
not
school board
include-
approved budget, these are the only kind of changes, kind of reallocation in terms of where it was. I'll also note that on the summary page, and if you want it broken down, we're happy to provide that for you, but it does show on the summary page, each one, how many, the number of FTEs. So for example, you'll see the school-based positions for growth. It talks about the existing staffing standards and SO2 compliance, that's at 111.4. So again, those, I think what they were saying, these are unchanged from your school board approved budget, but you can see those there. And we're happy to break that down further if you'd like.
Can I go back to ESL when we finish this, and I apologize because it came up when I was outside. Patrick, when you finish, I have a question on ESL.
Yes, ma'am.
Ready? Okay, we're using the April data. Do we have data from months prior to that? I'm concerned, and we're comparing September to April, and if we need fewer in April, that means to me that we've either lost students, or not lost them, but reduced the students, or else they've moved up to a different level. Do we evaluate in between? What-
We do.
So that-
The reason that April has particular value is because April is the first time where we have updated information on proficiency levels for students, because March is when the annual WIDA assessment is administered to our
Okay,
students.
so is this change based on a change in the proficiency or a reduction in the number of students? Because I'm concerned that we
It
may
would
not
be-
have an
wouldn't it be both?
accurate picture.
Because
as
we have
of
students that are
April.
gonna phase out of the levels that we don't need to
Right.
provide the services for
Right,
them
that's
at
what
the
I'm-
level.
It's
Right,
a-
I mean, I'm trying
Sure.
to balance this, particularly in view of the environment.
Yes, ma'am.
That we're in, currently in April.
Right, so if I, for the vast majority of this change is actually attributed to the change in the state guidance of how they treat students, which is particularly related to students that, there's lots of terms for them, but the state term is former Ls. These are students that have reached a proficiency level of at least level 5 on the WIDA assessment. The board adopted a staffing standard that addresses those students, because there is still work that needs to be done with those students. There's mandatory 4 years of monitoring under federal law, and a requirement for remedial services if necessary for students in that realm. The state,
What federal law is that? I have a feeling that may be changing.
that is under Title III of ESEA. So that is still the law right now, and the obligations on school divisions are still the obligations on school divisions.
No, I'm not suggesting we not do it, but
Right.
I'm suggesting that.
Understood, but that is an act of Congress, and the law itself is what sets the requirement for school divisions to set those reporting.
So our students really, the student count hasn't changed.
That's right, so it's not that,
Okay.
are there some, does the blend of students look a little different in April than it did in January? Sure, because there are students that have gained proficiency in that time. We've had new students who've enrolled that backfill, we've had students that have left. That's natural over a multi-month period.
Right, but we would expect the new students enrolling next year probably will not be at a higher level of proficiency.
Correct.
That the students may be in April. I just wanna make sure that we're not back here in August or September.
Correct.
Saying, oh my gosh, we got all these students and now we need to increase
Correct.
what
And
we decreased to budget, to balance everything out.
the good news is that when we did the historical check to see which of these projection approaches would be more accurate, using the April data as a proxy for what the following September would look like was the most stable and accurate model. And it actually tends to be slightly higher than what the actual September enrollment looks like, which is good, because there are students that enroll after September. September is the count that tells us what the state's gonna give us money for, so that's important for budget purposes. But we continue to have students enroll. In fact, one of the things that I've learned in this process as we're trying to get better with this, we actually have a decent increase in enrollment for English learners at the semester break, at the winter break, and that's in part because of the fact that our school calendar runs on a summer to summer model, whereas in Latin America, the school calendar runs on a January to December school calendar. So it's often the case that there are students that are leaving at the end of their school year, but it comes in the middle of
It's their
our.
summer, because their winter is.
Exactly, that's right, in the southern hemisphere.
Or something.
But that's true, that's true in Central America as well, for the school calendar. So that we have learned a lot about how to make our projections more accurate in this area. The concern you raised, Ms. Healy, is absolutely one that we took very seriously, because we do not want to be in a situation of having to come back to the board in the fall to ask for something that we could have predicted.
So I just also wanna clarify that the 8.5 that you have up here aren't people that we have not hired yet.
Correct,
We're
this is not a
looking
reduction of
at-
individuals.
Of the 31,
Right.
we were.
Well, there's still
thinking
20, there's still
31.
28.5 positions
28,
left.
yes.
28, so how, I'm just curious what our fill rate is on those positions at this point. Are they
I can
all
get that to
filled?
you.
Yeah, I just would like to
Well,
figure
they're for
out.
next year,
Huh?
they're not even funded till next year.
Well, I know, well, yeah,
And they
but
have been offered contracts.
all the way through, no,
No, they're due for
We
next year.
funded ESOL teachers at this point, right? I'm just
Not the-
wondering if
not
we
the
have a full
31.
capacity at this point, or what are we still going to be looking to fill?
Right, so this year there were 113.5 ESOL positions included in the board's budget, all but one of which was filled, and
Okay.
that one that was vacant was actually covered through the assignment of extra blocks to teachers.
So these 28 were on top of that 113?
Correct.
Gotcha,
The original was
okay.
36.5.
Yes, yes.
We're dropping that by 8.5.
Okay.
To only needing an additional 28 ESOL teachers. I can get an answer to you about where we are with the hiring staff.
Yeah, I just wanna know how close we are to filling this,
I would
this
like to
target.
share that information with the supervisors, just because during the whole budget thing, they raised questions about that. So, I mean, I'm sure we'll give them a general summary, but just so they know that, you know, with this reevaluation, because there was a lot of questions, I know we had questions, they had questions, why do we need all of a sudden 36, you know,
Well, I think everybody had
teachers?
that question. My concern
Right.
is
Yeah.
more related to our ability to fill the position and people starting to nag us about the fact that these are unfilled open positions with money
A
on the
lot
side.
of classroom
And I
teachers are
don't
gonna
know-
go to those.
Yeah, well, so I don't know, but
Which gives us a
again,
hole there.
the public doesn't necessarily know that, correct? So
When
I'd
are we
like for them
supposed
to
to
have a full understanding of how these positions are hired, why we do this way. In particular, I think it's important for them to know.
And
To
some
your
of,
point,
some of
because
our
of the level
teachers
of the
take it.
scrutiny. Yeah,
Some, ironically, you know, we lose teachers to the ESOL positions because they want to, you know, to have that experience or to do that different type of work. So it sounds like we've done a great job with filling them. Do you anticipate any issues in filling?
and to
them?
be honest, I'm probably gonna ask that question about all of our hard to staff, what I think are,
Mhm.
right, our hard to staff positions, like where are we at in terms of building that?
I would echo, I think I answered this question at some earlier point for the board, and I apologize if my memory is failing me on that, but as these positions go, ESOL is not a subject area I worry about, for exactly the reason that you cited, that oftentimes classroom teachers like to navigate into this territory.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
the challenge then becomes hiring the classroom teachers behind them, but we have to do,
Right.
this is not a either or, we have to do both of these things, so it's not
Right.
like,
It's an and.
this is a, oh no, we're hamstringing ourselves in, one area, we have to do both, so. But I'm happy to get the status for you.
please, it would be nice just to see across the board if you, I mean, if it's not that hard,
When is our next 3-on-3 supposed to be, theoretically?
August,
2028.
August
Oh, wow.
Is it right? Maybe it's,
By
sorry,
the
I
believe it's
cancellation
August.
calendar.
I think it's August 28th, if I remember correctly.
to Ms. Healy's point, maybe that's an opportunity to explain to them our like, more efficient or better metric and counts and how we reconciled this math, to make sure
Well,
the
it was
needs of
also
these.
partly clarification from BDOE.
Yeah,
Yes.
Right.
100%,
That's
but I
right.
think, like,
Yeah.
we talked about making sure the supervisors are aware, and that might be the best avenue to do that, because I don't think it's like something that translates easily in a memo.
Well, then you
but-
have to assume that they're gonna actually read the memo from us.
Yeah.
They're
and
gonna
That's why I'm more
understand it.
concerned about the public understanding how it works than anything else,
I mean,
because I
it
think.
was a shock to me to hear that we needed so many in
Yes.
1 year for the same
Absolutely.
students that we've had. It's not like we were expecting an influx of students to meet this. It was just to meet our current student needs, we needed over 36 or.
I will say with that
originally.
though, there was new staffing standards that are implemented by the state, so we were meeting at
The year
state.
before.
But we had to implement it this year was the deadline to
Right,
implement.
but then I found out that we were actually funded for these positions the year before, but apparently the money was allocated to other positions, and that's why it was part of this shock that we had to all of a sudden do, and you had nothing to do with you, because you weren't here, but, you know, we had to fund all these positions. But this has to be shown in context, and the reason I'm suggesting is that we saved this, but then we, in our reevaluation, we identified, you know, all these special education positions and these other positions we need, because if I were looking at this from a, you know, allocation of funding, I would say, well, you know, you have $500,000 that you know, didn't need. So it's just in terms of, you know, transparency and keeping those communications open. I'd rather explain it in a memo, even if the memo's not read, at least we can say, you know, there was a memo there that this is what we came out. I mean, it's all public information, so it's not like we're,
And we're always
not doing
adjusting
something.
staffing requirements based on actual needs, because we always base our budget on projected needs.
right, but it's not usually $500,000
That's-
in one
yes,
category.
absolutely.
After we went out
Absolutely.
and really made the case, we have no choice, this is mandatory, this is a state requirement, you know, and everything else. I just, it's my observation, it's something I think it would be prudent for us to share that information, and also at the same time, you know, while we were evaluating that, we evaluated the others, and these are additional costs, so it's not like we, you know, came up with, you know, we asked for $500,000 more than we actually needed.
Can I go back to a question Dr. Chase was referring to? In the growth positions, and I thank you, Dr. Smith, for pointing out to find this number, but it says 111.4 FTEs. And it's easy to count out like the ones that you just pointed out in the position adjustments, and it's easy to see the L coordinator, the bus attendants, the growth for the new schools. But what isn't super clear is what are those 111.4 FTEs? Is that what you were also getting to, Sarah? Yeah, or Dr. Chase. So is there any way that we can see a breakout of those 111.4?
Yeah, and we've attached
Positions.
them to, I didn't attach them today because
Okay.
it wasn't a change, but
Right,
we've
right.
had them as attachments for
Yeah.
previous work
But
sessions.
as we're trying to go through things, I think
Sure.
that would just be helpful for us to know,
Yep,
where are they?
yeah, and we can even attach them, for-
Chris, to your point, we've done that
for
where it's
later
been
tonight.
like high school, we need this for this many
We had it
students,
broken out
right?
by
That's the chart
level,
that we have, that's what that-
teachers,
yeah.
paras.
Yeah.
And how
And now
that
that we're
works.
just like having to do our due diligence in the cutting and, or the adding or approving, whatever, if we could just have that. Am I hitting that right?
Yeah, no,
That's
I
exactly what you
tried this
asked.
morning to dig that paper out and I
Yeah.
couldn't find it, so,
Right.
you know, I
Yeah.
know I've seen it, but I see
Exactly.
this and then I'm like, okay, so
And what else?
what
Right.
else, right?
Okay,
Yeah, that's easy enough.
okay,
Yeah, because the other 12.5 are accounted for.
yeah, I can see those.
But I
We
also
can
think
even-
it's
I can even
important
try
to
to
note that we need
Get it for
to,
us right now if that, would that'd be helpful.
we need to also make it clear though that, you know, when we're putting out these numbers, they are projected numbers based on a variable that can change. It's not a fixed variable. It is a variable for that very good reason. So whereas we are giving you one number, it's literally like
Flexible.
based on this information that we have now and what the state is telling us now, and because the state can change on a dime, our allocations can change on a dime. And so I think it's really important to make sure that we keep hitting, like driving that home to people, that like, we're not just throwing numbers around to throw numbers around.
Right.
We are, like, the environment changes all of the time. And I think it's important for folks to know that we do have to go through this process, like this level of granularity, look into where we can pick and pull from and how we can pick and pull from it. while we're still meeting the mandatory state minimums or whatever it might be. It's a point for me that can't be spoken enough.
You're exactly right, Ms. Alsted, and we work with human resources and our school leadership to look at it very frequently, to look at where our projections, where are our kids at, what are our student needs, and we make adjustments throughout the year, and so you're right, you're very much, it is projections.
And the
It's like a
reallocation
Ferris
is based
wheel
on the
that's
total number of
actual
students,
growth.
which hasn't changed.
Right, well, yeah, I mean, and the thing is that we have to project for what may or may not be coming based on history, not on what we think the future might look like. That's the problem, right? And I get that the future could be very different, but
Absolutely.
it's frustrating, go ahead.
So maybe, are you good with continue in the
Yeah.
Yes.
presentation? Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, and almost done, actually. So, with those adjustments to departments and the FTEs, which net out to zero with the one reduction on the grant positions and the salary adjustments, it does align our proposed adopted budgeted expenditures with our adopted revenue, and which means we have a balanced budget.
Question,
Yes, ma'am.
on this page here,
Yeah.
the BCBA, y'all forget that we're not all experts in education
Yeah.
terminology.
Board
Okay.
certified behavior analyst.
Okay, well,
Analyst.
tell me next time.
Okay.
Also sometimes known as an applied behavior analyst or ABA
Okay.
therapist. So,
So also just touching on a few of the one-time capital items, and some of the carryover funds, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but just pointing out that, one of the things that was originally proposed in the departments was the Chromebook replacement, cyclic replacement. We pulled that out in the superintendent's budget and proposed using one-time funds for that. We'll talk about that later. Also, we're using one-time funds for the Blackjack Road property. Just letting you know, as we already discussed, it was approved by the Board of Supervisors, but we are closing on that like literally today. And then,
So do we also have in this larger budget Chromebook purchases?
there are some that are
Where would I
purchased.
find them on this page?
So it's not like an increase in the budget, the only increase was with the one-time capital.
Gotcha, so it's not an increase, but we have some amount that,
Yes, some that are operating, some that are grant funded with like BPSA technology funds is our bulk of how we fund those Chromebooks. So the Board of Supervisors has already appropriated those carryover funds, and then we'll get guidance today from the school board on exactly how we want to allocate those. Digging into a little bit deeper on the state bonus payment, as I mentioned, it was $1,000 proposed by the state, but it was only funding SOQ positions, but they gave us the flexibility to reduce that so that there was no local match required. And for us, based on the number of employees we have now, and so let me back up for just a minute. Our proposal is to do that more as a retention bonus, and how that would work is on June 15th is kind of I want to say a due date for contracts, but it is somewhat of a state deadline. And so we want to say, for any of our employees that return their contracts, sign those contracts by June 15th, that they do intend to return for next year, they would be eligible for a $700 bonus to be paid out on July 1st. So a little bit of an incentive not only to return their contracts quickly, but just to return, generally speaking.
Are you talking about full-time?
For full-time employees, yes, ma'am. And as I mentioned, it would be prorated and for our part-time employees. I do want to point out, one of the things that Carter and I were working on late last week and over the weekend is we're getting a flat dollar amount from the state of 3.3. We don't know exactly how many employees are gonna sign and return their contracts. The estimate of $700 is based on, we've already reduced by the people that have identified or to us that they are retiring or resigning for whatever various reasons. So that is an updated number based on people that we think are going to return next year. That number could come down a little bit. And so when we get to the board meeting tonight, we might amend that language to give us some flexibility of if that number does drop lower, than what we currently anticipated, we could actually increase. Now, we're not talking $100 or $200, it would take it from $750, $725, $750, but we want to expend all of those dollars, we don't want to return it back to the state. So one of the things that we want
This
to,
is sort of a minimum of 700, and then everybody's part-time would be prorated based on that.
yes, and
Whatever
then,
the
so it
number
could come up a little bit, and then same thing, we prorate, so.
Okay, I like that.
Okay.
So the $3.3 million has been, I'm assuming we have to go across the street and get that appropriated
Yes.
to us as well?
Yes.
So would we be seeing any delays from them, because we know that happened last year?
Yeah, it's happened twice.
So I would like for our folks not to get let down by that, because that money is ours, coming from the state, not the county, but we
It's
still have to jump
All
through
being
the
transferred to
hoops.
our employees, it's not
Right,
for us.
but so that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying,
they did that
like,
last
so
time.
just to be clear though, this is this layer that we have to walk through. That is like gasoline, we're walking through with a lit match and someone has has already spread the gasoline. So I just wanna make sure we're clear that our hope is July 1, because
Yes.
that money is ours
But we're
to
not
be
through the
spent.
flames yet, there's been no reason.
I just wanna make sure,
I mean,
because,
you know.
no,
When does
there
it-
is,
when
because
does
we
it
have
go
a
before the
history here.
supervisors?
We're planning on taking it
We
June
have a history.
third, and we've
I
been
get it.
in
I
talk
just
with
wanna make
county
sure, because
administrator
last
about
year,
it.
it hit hard.
We
Like,
have,
our
we have had
folks were really
conversation with the
upset
county
us.
administrator about it, they
Good.
understand there's no local match required, this is really just pass-through funds, and so
Okay.
they were very supportive of it, and
too.
so.
Be very
yeah.
clear for
So we are
everyone.
looking at that June 3rd date, to
Okay.
take it to the supervisors.
Okay.
And that, I believe, is it. Just timeline, so I kinda had a lot of these dates throughout the presentation, some of these are, also recapping some of our prior dates. But tonight, we wanted to adopt the budget, and then, assuming we don't have any changes to salaries, we're prepared to have contracts ready and released to employees on Friday, right, Patrick? We're still in line there, so Ms. Fitch has been working with HR staff very closely to get that all ramped up, ready to go. And there's a lot of proofing there, we gotta wanna get those contracts as correct as possible. And so if we make any changes, it just starts a cycle again of going through review
Can I
process.
ask, 2 questions about Blackjack?
Sure.
What is the age of the roof and the age of the HVAC? I asked it sort of last time, but it didn't.
I can get the answer to you, but I think the building is only 10, or maybe less than 10 years old. It's about the-
And they
Yeah,
gave us some credit on closing
This
for
is the
like
county.
minor things to,
like to recoat the roof.
yeah, they've credited back so we can
Is there
redo.
leaking already?
Like minor, but actually the overall condition of the building and the roof was okay, there was just some stuff.
It's to give it, to make sure that
We
it's
negotiated with the seller
sealed
to get
on
some money.
us getting it, that they've given us some funding back on
It is.
closing towards that, to make sure all,
And then,
everything's sealed up,
so
so to
the age
speak.
of the building you say is less than 10, so that
I
means the
thought it was about
HVAC
10
is
years
less than
old.
10?
Jason will
Oh,
confirm.
sorry, Jason, thank you.
So just if I could, with this timeline, I don't anticipate that the meal tax hearing isn't gonna happen the way we expect, but if it does, what happens? Like,
We
we
have
don't,
to
If it
take
does or
$3
if it
million out
doesn't.
of our
if we
budget.
don't get that $3 million, what's the plan?
We would have to come back and reconcile again for the 3.1 million.
And cancel those contracts, you tell people, right? Oh,
Well,
no?
I think the
Okay.
contract says like pending appropriation,
Okay,
and then we would just have to reappropriate in the reconciliation, and then
amend
we
it.
would have to
reconcile.
reissue.
And we've
but-
had several conversations with the county administrator about this. I've sent a letter over to them. He shared there was no concerns
Right.
with
I'm
us
just-
proceeding,
Yeah.
yeah. I get
People
the
like
caution.
surprises.
Number one.
And then what
Um,
happens with staff, if I'm a
I want
person, I sign my
people to hear
contract.
that if this happens, this is what
Yep,
would
thanks
then
for
happen,
pointing that
out.
that the 16th is still, whatever you get on the 16th is contingent on the vote on the 20th.
And what can they do on the 21st, if they've signed on the 16th or 17th, on the 21st, on the 20th, something crazy happens, what can a staff person, can they say, I know I already signed my contract, turned it in because I wanted the bonus, but now I don't wanna be an employee anymore, they don't, They're allowed to do that, right? There's like a window.
If they wanted to resign,
Yeah, because of the because the
If
amendment.
we've changed the
We have to
contract.
offer,
Licensed
we have to
teachers.
offer a new contract.
Right.
No, you just said we don't have to do new contracts.
We will
then.
have
We
to
would
after
need
We're gonna
to
have
do
to, we're gonna
contracts.
have to
If
do
we
either
reconcile
that or
and
amend
change
the
salaries.
contract,
Okay.
because we're reducing
Right.
the
Which gives them
salary.
the out, is what I was trying to
Right,
understand.
yes,
from
yes,
that person.
yes,
Okay.
they're not, this
I
is
just-
a right to work state.
Okay.
And part of the, oh, sorry, go ahead. I was gonna point out and actually have Patrick explain why we picked June 15th as our cutoff for.
Correct, under state law, licensed employees have the opportunity until June 15th to leave their current position, inform us they do not plan to return, and we release them from, even if they have signed a contract, the expectation of state law is to release them to whatever they plan on doing afterwards, including taking a position with another school division. After June 15th, under state law, there is no requirement that you have to grant the release of a contract. And so the standard practice, not just in Stafford, but in all school divisions, is that unless there is a reason to affirmatively grant release right away, the standard practice is that we release pending hire of suitable replacement for the position. So being able to reach a resolution before June 15th, it gives us the opportunity to reach that termination, taking that cutoff date into consideration.
But when are you sending them out?
On the 13th.
we'd like to get them out Friday.
The contracts are coming out this Friday.
Which is the date?
16th, May 16th.
But that was June, he's talking about we're in May.
I thought he said May 15th.
No,
No, no, no.
June 15th is the statutory deadline.
Okay, June.
Okay, so they'll have time to back out.
Well, hypothetically, they could go out after the 20th, hypothetically, and then there would be no contingency or anything like that, I'm just.
They could, it makes it really difficult when folks have,
Not suggesting that they do that, but if I were an employee, I would feel more secure in signing a contract that did not have a little asterisk that said, well, if we don't get the money, then this amount
They
is.
always have that.
They always have
I was gonna
that.
say that.
Yeah.
They always have
Well,
that in there.
no, but
Understood,
this is
yeah.
even more
Yeah,
significant
this
though,
is-
because
Yeah.
we've got an approved level from the supervisors, even with their 5% withholding. This is a wish and a hope, that it goes through, and I,
But they don't have to sign until after the vote, so.
Yeah.
they have-
Right, I would probably wait till the 21st if I
Probably
were
most of
somebody.
them would, I would assume.
Yeah.
I think we're
But they don't
also,
have to sign.
yeah, and as you know, we're also competing against other school divisions that are getting their contracts out, and so that's the other reason that we felt good about where it was, we've had good conversations, and so that's where the
I know, we can feel good, but that doesn't make it happen.
I just think it's a matter of like, we've touched that burner and been burned one too many times, that now there's sort of an over precaution on all of our parts for that, because it's just not been I get, it's changing now, and that is good to see, like, I think the open dialogue that you have with Mr. Ashton is very hopeful and very encouraging to all of us,
But he doesn't vote.
but, well, it's about to get to that.
Oh, sorry, I got the punchline.
But for us, then, I think it becomes
It's-
really important, because
it's-
we are the ones then, and we can take all the abuse and all the hitting and all the whatever that we get from everybody. But the fact of the matter is we walk this walk every year, and then somehow or another, it's like running 90 miles an hour into a brick wall. So this year, we're just hoping it's a wall of balloons, and we're gonna run right through it, and everyone will get what they were promised. I know, just my analogies, it all comes out of me when it rains. I love the rain. I love the rain, brings out
I
imagery, I
have one
can't
more
help it.
question.
I mean, hypothetically, we could publish our proposed list of salaries, and people could look up, what theirs would be, and that would be pending the approval of the meals tax, and then send them out on even that night. Do they do that in their afternoon session, or their evening session, or whatever? I don't know, I mean, we've had this discussion, and I know you want them out there, but I just am not really comfortable sending something out saying this is what we think we're gonna get when we haven't gotten it yet.
Right, but how much more language is in that contract that they have to review? How big is the contract that they're signing?
The language of the contract will be the same no matter what, because we always have a provision that states performance contingent upon the appropriation of
Yeah.
necessary funds by the school board. So-
Yeah, so, and I also think people want something in their hands, sooner rather than later, because there is other
Right.
stuff that they read or review or whatever.
But appropriation of this 3.1 is, in my view, an entirely different ball field than the appropriation of the rest of the money, which they've already approved. That's all. And
Can I ask, you gave us the list of the K-3 class size reduction. Where are those three,
Is that,
what elementary schools are those three
are we,
CSRs
is
going
that part
to?
of a future agenda item, or is that related to this one, or?
Well, it was
It's kind
part
of
of their
both.
budget
Yeah.
presentation, so I
Okay.
just didn't
So-
know where they're going.
Where-
Do we know?
I can't, Falmouth, Prairie Farm, and Whitewater.
Okay.
And
Thank
again,
you.
that's
And
a.
that's
Jason
if
found your
they
numbers,
get
I think. Susan.
the additional
Oh,
students,
gotcha.
right? It's not a guarantee.
Oh.
So we-
It's we're projecting that based
Come
on the
sit.
numbers. It's not, they're not,
I swore it
we're not
was
just
for-
giving them the
it's
position,
fine.
right?
But is
So-
it for 20, are you asking, is it for 20,
Well,
25
because
or
we
for
are adding,
26?
we're adding three positions for growth.
Mhm.
So I just didn't know where those, I see
Sure.
the breakout of what we
Okay.
currently have. I'm curious where those positions will go.
Right, so, again, I think the way that I would point this out is, especially when we take CSR into account, but really with everything, we use the phrase growth, and that is at a grand division level, we're looking at number of
Always,
positions this
yeah.
year versus but in terms of site allocations, it's really a zero-based approach.
Okay.
Regardless of what we needed this year, what do we see next year? What does that trigger in terms of staffing need? And that's where we rely on Mr. White's projections, which, as this board has discussed many times, have a tremendous high rate of accuracy, both for industry and just overall. And that is what we rely on for those staffing allocations. Even with tremendously accurate projections, which his are, that are based on multiple years of historical data, you can sometimes find small little quirks that arise. And I would say that these three fall into that category, where
Okay.
the historical trend, I'll use Ferry Farm as an example, the historical trend, cohort progression, et cetera, would suggest an enrollment of 93 students in first grade at Ferry Farm next year. But they currently have 102 kindergartners this year, right now. Now, because they're a class size reduction school, that's a difference of a classroom that would be required to stay in the class size reduction.
And what is the number?
Um,
Class size reduction?
yeah.
Is it 20?
For kindergarten, it is it's 24 for Ferry Farm.
24.
So, that's an anomaly, that there would be that kind
Yeah.
of discrepancy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we want to acknowledge that there may be those discrepancies and to plan ahead for that. We do regular enrollment monitoring throughout the summer to see what amount of staffing is necessary to remain in compliance with class size reduction requirements. And so there are, ongoing adjustments that may be necessary.
Okay.
Up and down.
Okay.
The last couple of years, it has typically been, we have been able to pull some, on net, we have ended up being able to pull back more positions than
Okay.
we needed to add. In these three situations, because of that quirk, where the immediate year data tells a slightly different story than what the historic data tells, this is just a way of getting ahead of it.
So can I ask a question about the proposed FY '26 teacher scale?
Yes.
So basically with the, and maybe I'm wrong, I'm just trying to process this. So basically we are changing our scale from a 3% step to a 2.7% step? No.
No, so it's still a 3% differential from, I'll say 1 to 15. And so that's where you'll see in the column closer to the middle, it'll say step differential, and that's actually what it is between each step. The proposed projected increase is because we didn't across the board on those steps. So that's showing the actual salary increase that those employees that are on those steps will see. The projected increase, the only change that we're doing is at the very bottom, because we increased that base scale $100, it kind of compresses from 0 to 1.
Hello. So I'm still, all right, so if we give 2.7 to up at the above 17, that 1.5 still stays 1.5
Yes, ma'am.
between the steps.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't know if I pointed it out earlier, but we are doing, even if for our off-scale employees, so we go up to 30 on this scale, but we have folks that go up well above 30 and have been grandfathered in, so they'll get a 2.7% across the board as well.
But are people actually getting their step?
So we've kind of adjusted the scales. They're not getting what was in last year's full step. We want them to maintain on the proper step. So if they're on 15 this year, they're gonna be on 16 next year, but we had to adjust the scale to make it represent the salaries that are proposed for next year.
So how is it still a 3% difference? I'm confused. So if last year I got, I'm just gonna start with a relatively, let me see if there's one. Okay, so last year I got 60,300, and so now I'm supposed to get a 3% step.
You're not getting a full step though.
I'm not getting it, so it is changing.
So last year, step 6 was 60,300. This year, step 6 is 60,126. So it's actually less if you look at across the board, but every employee moves up a step. So that's level 6, year 6 employee this year is gonna be year 7 next year. So that's a 2.7% increase.
Right, so it's not a 3% step.
No, it is not.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. We
Yeah.
are not giving people a 3%
Correct.
step.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm concerned that we publish it as a 3% when they aren't actually getting a 3%.
Yes, and so we don't intend to there is 3% between each steps, they're not getting a step, they're getting a 2.7% increase across the board.
Okay, so that's my question, because this whole thing has always caused the confusion. We have a scale, steps, and phases, and no one has ever been able to appropriately articulate for the community what that actually means and how that translates onto paper. So in this particular case, we do not have the funding to do any steps or phases, whatever we had proposed in
Correct.
our original 5-year budget.
Yes.
But we are adjusting the scale up by 2.7%. So that to me is the only way I can,
Right, so to me, it's like the step became 2.7 rather than 3.
So this, and it's not both.
well, to me, it's not a
I think when you say
step.
step, right,
Look at the
you're,
zero.
the actual step of them moving up, like,
It's not in
a
it.
step is a verb, right? Like, yeah, they're only moving up 2.7% of where they're at this year. We look at it as, if you're looking at the scale and they're gonna move up a full step, that would have been 3%, but we adjusted what that was this year by adjusting the whole scale. But our scale for next year still has those 3% differentials.
No, the
But we need to.
the county, the way they
This is what
explain
happens
it
when
in
you
their
merge English
proposal
and
is
math.
like,
It's a mess.
and I might have the numbers reversed or slightly off, but they advertised it as like 1.5% step and 1.25 for like raise. So like their math,
Scale adjustment.
so we talk about it differently than they do, so even, like, I just wanna put out there that their math is about the same, it's not like they pulled a fast one on us. They are talking about a 1.5 step approximately and a 1.25 increase approximately that will come out to 275. I still don't, Yeah.
What I've seen in the past is people are expecting, when they see a 3% step like this, they are expecting 3%. And when they don't get 3%, then the following year, they're expecting us to make that up plus give them their step for the next year. And I don't want that confusion to be there. The fact is, we have changed our scale from 3% to 2.7%. So maybe that's what we should put down rather than acting like there is going to be a 3%.
It's still coming, right?
Right.
Well, we can't
Because
promise
even
that,
though this, I know Dr. Chase is not saying that we are doing this on purpose.
No.
No.
But our way of communicating it to people, like there are some teachers who might think like me, and I can do a little bit of math on a calculator and see what 3% is from what I have now and what I'll get later and know that that's not it. And then we look disingenuous and we look like we're trying to pull one over. And we know we're not because we don't have control of our money and everyone knows that, so then just make it plain. We wanna give you guys a 3% step increase, but that's not what we're doing this year and we may not do it next year. Like we just need to make it plain and honest or we lose trust and credibility.
Well-
And when Dr. Chase points it out here, it does make it look like we're not being as forthcoming as we're supposed to. And then I feel like, well, what the heck am I fighting for if I don't even understand it? So.
Well, and even if you look at steps 60, or years 16 up, their step differential is 1.5%, and that this year, they're getting a 2.7. So they're getting teachers or educators above 16
Right,
are getting more
are getting
than-
2.7
versus 1.5.
versus 1.5.
Right.
And so,
So this scale versus like 25, it's like the bottom half of the scale is slightly worse than what is currently in place, and the top half is like slightly better, so that they could all get the same percent, because our scale typically isn't built for them to all get a flat percent. So it's slightly compressed at the bottom, but the differentials are the same except at the bottom. We're compressing it slightly to make it work and altering it from this year. So it is a little bit confusing.
I think I would take that column out, the step differential, because we no longer.
Yeah, and we normally
adhere to
don't,
that.
I actually put that on there for y'all, that's not something we usually
Okay.
publish
Right.
in our
Cause
budget
that's our
book or we send out to
proposal, but our
employees.
proposal is now out the window.
I did it for this
Okay.
meeting for transparency, because I wanted
Okay.
you to see, we are compressing at the bottom of the scale by increasing that.
Right.
Yeah, which we didn't wanna
Still,
do, 'cause
we are still compressing at the
Right,
bottom.
but
And
when
part of
we,
our-
when we published the 5-year budget, just to go back, cause perhaps I've been thinking this wrong for the last 3.5 years, yeah. But we've been talking about implementing phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and that was all tied to our 5-year budget, which we identified the steps we were going to take to make this, to even this salary situation out, correct? But now we have to abandon our phased implementation because the 5-year budget was not met.
phase 4. is
Phase
not
4 of the
met.
5-year
Phase four
budget was
was
not
not
met.
Right.
So it's really, it's going to be very confusing because even when we came out with the 503 million, we spoke very strongly about wanting to implement phases.
But that
which-
wasn't even a full phase 4.
Correct, but that's how we
spoke.
spoke at that
Yes,
point in time. So
right.
what the public heard us say was, we wanted phase 4 of the teacher scale
Mm-hmm.
and to bring our support staff up to phase 3.
Yeah.
That was all tied to our 5-year budget, which was thrown out the window. Year 1. Well, sorry. Yeah, pretty much. But now it's going to get more confusing because that phase was related to steps, which is really just, right now, overall, we're just adjusting a scale.
Yeah, and so just 2 points on that is, yes, normally we wouldn't show the step or differential. We wanted to show you because there is still that 3% between each step, right? So that the integrity of that scale from steps 1 to 15 remains in terms of your work to try to get 3% between each step. It does show that now in step 0, it is 2.5% in terms of what is the actual amount between step to step. You're exactly right. We didn't give everybody a step. It's what I'm recommending is 2.7% across the board, because I didn't think we could get to 3%. The county's at 2.75. I didn't think we could get to 3. And then I also, if we got to 3 for some, then we'd be at 1.5 for others if we gave a step. And considering inflation at 2.9, really wanted to try to address that as well. So that's part of the rationale for recommending the 2.7% across the board. Again, we want to be clear, want to be transparent. I appreciate the questions and conversation, and we will,
Well,
based on what you approve, we will work to
And
make
it's
that
an
clear.
emotional discussion, that's the problem. It's that it's not something, even if you're a rational thinker, that you can look at and really kind of bring the information down rationally. It's an emotional discussion.
And it's very confusing.
Well,
It
was
for
easier in-
people in the 17 to 30 years, they were always getting this delayed gratification. They were still only at 1.5%.
Right.
So to a certain extent, they're getting better. We've kind of levelized the playing field a little bit, but I think what we really need to do is next year's year 5, we need to really have a serious discussion about what the salary scale looks like next year. Are we, maybe we can't keep, maybe we
Make
can't
it
do 3%.
sustainable.
Make it sustainable. And next year is when this all 5-year budget comes to an end, we are gonna have to make a decision about what that looks like.
So does that become
I feel like our
a-
5-year budget came
a
to an end the
retreat
minute we
item?
couldn't,
That's
like,
probably a good idea.
Right.
the
Where's
minute
the new
we,
5-year
the minute we
budget?
were $14 million
Put a-
short,
like a-
our 5-year
Right,
budget
right.
came to an
And
end.
next year's not gonna be better.
Right, I
gonna be
mean,
worse.
so it's frustrating because.
So we can't, I don't wanna promise staff something we can't deliver.
I agree, no, I agree.
And I'm more comfortable giving everybody
We're not gonna be anywhere near
2.7%
this.
than to continue to delay the raises, the scale for the people who are at 17 to 30 years.
Yeah, no, so I
Yeah,
totally
no,
agree with you that the
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I know.
2.7% is the
I'm not-
right way to
yeah.
go, but
Missy?
there's an emotionality
Can
around
we,
this conversation that
add this
occurs.
pay scale
And that,
discussion?
and then it's like a boomerang back
Well,
on us, right?
That too, but for a retreat in particular, as something to consider
When are
adding
we-
to their retreat agenda when we get there.
Going to fix 1 year, because right now we've got 3% from 2 to 16.
Yeah.
But year 1 is 2.5, so that's, you know,
Yeah,
it's
so that's
something
maybe
that's,
the whole thing
it's an
is-
aberration. And my other question is, how in the world are we gonna expect to attract new teachers when we've only raised our starting salary by $100? I mean,
That's not a
seriously,
question
for
don't
us,
say
though.
cost.
Because we're not
No, but
only
everybody
recruiting
else is getting
teachers
the
at your
percentage.
That's
zero.
correct,
Starting
someone has to
teacher.
convince someone outside of this room that that's
Well,
important.
no, we're the one allocating this, so
No,
it's
but
in our
but
hands.
we're only allocating the pennies that were being given, do you know what I mean?
We got millions here, Alyssa, I mean,
But look how many people we need
But
to
I
hire.
think that's the
Okay, but my
question.
point-
You can fix it there, you can give them more there, but then who else are you gonna basically
my,
screw over?
my point is though, we can't be crying, we can't attract teachers if we're not doing anything on this base scale. $100 between last year and this year, we
Absolutely.
all know it costs more than that for gas, the prices.
But then
you know,
where do you
going
suggest we get the money from though? That's where where do we get the money from? Should we, cause for me, then it comes from the site allocations. We have to pull all that money back, because that's money we can utilize for teachers and build the bulk up. And then what do our individual schools do? Put the pressure on the parents to have the money
Yeah,
to
but-
do all that stuff? Like, where do you get the money
Well,
from?
I would like FAFC to look at this, because I see a serious problem in recruiting. What are our surrounding jurisdictions doing in terms of the
Better.
difference between their 25 and 26
Well, I mean,
starting
Prince William-
teacher salaries
Prince William is
percentage?
doing 7% across the
Well,
board.
Yeah.
But our competitive ones, Spotsy
Well,
and.
Spotsy's doing better.
It's not about,
King George
it's
now.
also
We
about
catch up
geography
to
though.
Spotsy, and
It's not
that's
just-
part of how we get some more experienced teachers, because at some point, our lines cross, and, because we have
$100.
bigger steps in between.
But I agree with you, but I think we need to look at the whole scale and say, how do we
Yes.
make this work so that we can sustain this? Because I don't like making promises to people that we can't keep.
Mhm.
And the 3% differential, it's not working, and
I'm
that's
not-
why
I
we
don't
suppressed,
disagree with that.
we suppressed, that's why we've not raised the entry level pay scale for 2 years. So it's not a good position to be in. So I think, but is it a retreat discussion, or is it a FAFC discussion, or
Or both.
I think it's both.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the 3% has been very challenging, and it has prevented us from trying to address the very bottom of the scale. So I do think a conversation around the step scale, the pay scale, what's an appropriate amount between. We did look at Prince William and Spotsylvania in terms of what's in between some of their scales. And there's a range of I feel like it was 2.15 to 2.5. We can provide that to you, but we looked at some of that. They're not at 3%. And so I just think we need to take a closer look at that, so that we can appropriate that money to some of the bottom of the scale in the future.
Well, good luck hiring people when we're offering $100 difference between last year and this year.
But you could also say good
But
luck
you're-
retaining
but-
people when you're not, like, I agree with you 100%,
I think
but the
we're
money
I think
is,
we're
it's all
okay
the
in
same
retaining.
pot.
We got
Well,
the 3%.
But if you up this here, you're gonna make it smaller here, so then that does become a retention conversation. So you can't criticize saying we're not bringing new people in without acknowledging that we're trying to keep the ones we have here at the same time. It's
Or
one pot of money to pay
retaining
these
people.
individuals who deserve.
Or
Or that
recruiting
being
people.
shown even
But-
a dollar across the
But we
board
also
is
have to
detrimental to
remember
the
that we
system.
have not just been
Chris,
hiring
do surrounding
first-year
communities
teachers,
offer
we've done
tuition
better
assistance
at
or
hiring
tuition
teachers with more
reimbursement?
experience because of our scale.
Right.
So if
So
we
we're
don't
the
get
only one
that
that does that.
first year,
It's not year
we're
zero
definitely
with
get
Stafford, it's year
something.
zero in
Student loan
teaching
repayment.
Right.
overall. It's like, we are bringing more experienced teachers because we've been able to do
better.
a little better than, not all surrounding counties, but some surrounding counties in
But we
the middle
also
to
bring in, we have
of the
tuition,
scale.
reimbursement program for student loans
But
too.
typically,
So
somebody
we do
new
have that, we have better
will
health
appreciate
insurance,
that.
so we
You know,
do.
somebody new isn't
I wouldn't talk
necessarily
about health
appreciate that or
insurance,
understand
that's going
that
up
value.
significantly.
I do
But
have
definitely
I have a question, Mr.
Yes.
Fuller. So I've asked these two people on the other side of me, because I think we're all having a collective senior moment. We absolutely understand what pot of money is which, except for local, right? What that $6 million, where is that coming from? We were thinking, is that the lunch fund and the blackjack revenue, and what is that?
So it's things like, blackjack revenue, but other rebates,
Is
or,
it grants?
no, our grants typically are in our grants fund
Okay.
if they're tied directly to an expenditure. These would be, student fees that are charged and then submitted up to central office. If we have rental fees that are charged, if somebody does a
Okay.
field rental
All right.
or a
I get
school
what you're
building
saying.
rental,
Okay,
and it's sent up to central office.
okay, I couldn't understand.
That line does
Fees for
include our
service.
day
It's also with-
school,
and also with
yeah.
contingency
So,
in there.
I
Okay.
know Jason wants to answer the question before, so he can do some other stuff, so Jason, did you wanna answer that question?
Sure, so the facility was built in 2012, it's about 13 years old.
Okay.
HVAC systems of that type, 15 to 20 years. So, worst, we'll probably replace it somewhere in 5, 6, 7 year range, but these aren't your multi-million-dollar systems, these are $10,000, $20,000 type of systems, much.
Really? But how many are there?
I believe there's 4 total units.
Okay,
So.
it's like 100,000.
It's not like our school mechanical projects that we
Right,
have to do.
10 million,
Right.
yeah, that's nice.
No, nothing of that
That,
kind of.
that complication.
Nothing of that kind of
Yeah.
magnitude. The roof, there was a piece that, as Chris mentioned, we had a leak recently. They did make repairs to that. They allowed us another $10,000 in the final closing to do some more work. We have a quote for, I believe it's about $7,000 to do a little bit more work there, so we should be fine to cover that.
Okay, thank you.
So I just wanna say one thing, I would just, since we were talking about SAPs and stuff like that, I think in this discussion, this is really weird coming from the most anti-technology person probably on the board next to Chase, but I feel very frustrated. I know why we're pulling back the technology position, but I also feel like every year for our poor technology folks, we add more and more and more to their plate. And we manage to reduce software, I guess that's fine, but we don't, our physical assets are still there for them, and we never give them another person to help with that workload. So I would just like it known that it feels like the right thing to do, and I know we have a new person coming on board and their vision maybe, but I'd like to know that we could support that person with people if their vision is whatever. So it's really confounding for me to see that kind of, I guess we look at it as, like, I think it's easy for people to blow it off and be like, oh, you spent that much money on a person, but I don't think you understand the fleet that person's that team is responsible for, and how small that team actually is. Now, these are my new, like, fluffy shades, cause I'm on the technology advisory committee now, so I can do all this, but
I
anyway,
honestly would
maybe
rather
there's a
see-
reason for that.
I would rather see
Right?
boots, I would
I
rather
swear
see
to God.
boots on the ground than another head in charge of that.
So
On
so
that
I
one.
just wanna make sure that we understand, like, we really do need to consider filling those gaps in the future,
Do we have that
because-
list of the 111, or is that coming later?
Oh,
You have it?
so,
That's from the
well,
approved.
we have what was in the approved budget, so it
Right.
doesn't take into account the positions that we
Right,
shifted
these
around, cause we
ones.
haven't updated it for that yet, we
Okay.
do that as part of we
Okay.
did it on the presentation. But we have just what was
This
in
is the
there.
111 that we were.
What, that was in your budget,
Right,
is that okay?
right, yeah.
For right now, we can get it up,
And we can, you can tell us and we'll just write
Yeah,
different
that's
numbers,
fine.
right?
Thank you.
It's just gonna change the.
We're just killing another tree.
yeah.
Does this equal 111?
It's warm in here, isn't it?
You can,
I
there's
turn
a
back
button
to it as well.
Turn it over.
Can I put this one back?
Oh, okay, I was like, something happened.
I had to do front and back,
Did you
same
count
as trees.
This equals 111, okay.
Yeah, and then
This
there's
is
12 right
blocking
now.
my air, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah,
guys,
I
I'm
know.
not
Solid,
over here, so.
CSR and,
CSR, yeah.
what was the other one?
But-
Special ed,
And
5.5 special ed.
Mr. Fulton, can I confirm that these figures reflect still what was in the approved budget?
Correct.
Is that right?
Oh,
So that's
they
why,
do.
like, if you
Yes,
total up
yes.
what you
There's
saw, you'll
also
still see
the-
36.5,
Yes.
so that hasn't been adjusted
But,
here, so.
but yeah, and the adjustments are in the presentation we just got.
Just wanted to
Also
confirm
the
that.
new
Well, so then
schools.
the other question I have is, on the back of this, we used to have the unfunded needs that the school system has, do we still have that list?
So we have it, but it needs updated too, based
Okay.
on all the changes from,
Yeah, I'd like to
After time.
update that and have it attached, because I do think it's important for people to see, like, what we're actually giving up and sacrificing as a system. I get it, we can't be perfect, we can't have a perfect world, whatever that means, but if we could.
Let's say not giving up, let's say working towards.
Correct, but I think that it's important for the public to remember that there
How do
is
you do
still
list?
a list of things that we're not even looking at this point,
Thanks.
as a
Yeah.
21st century school system.
We're happy to update it, just might not be.
What's the
tomorrow.
encore?
No, it's fine.
It's special
Okay, so
elementary.
I'm just confused
Art.
because,
Yeah, all that
because this
stuff.
adds up to 106.4, but we have 111.4. So where are the other 5 positions that have been added?
Is that the-
Is that new schools?
No, the
There
new
was
schools
6
was a
there,
separate
right?
item.
Yeah, there was a separate document that broke out the other ones. Is it the buses thing?
Oh, it is 164.
This is 106.
Yeah,
But this includes the extra ESOL that we're not going to bill yesterday.
Yeah, but
What,
they.
we moved them over to.
Yeah, they.
Right, so what I'm saying is this is
Right, right.
106.4, but what's here is 111.4.
So there's 5.
So there's 5 something else.
Well, but there's,
Um,
but
I
some of
actually
these
can
are
count.
changed. These are not accurate then, because we've taken out.
He said that, yeah, he
Yeah.
said
So,
that.
so why do we have one that's, why are we getting something that's not accurate?
Because he was
They-
just,
He
they
said-
haven't updated their stuff
Because they haven't
yet.
updated it.
That's
When
what
are
the
you
board
gonna
asked for.
update it?
Because we just
I know,
asked
I'm
him to
just-
do it.
Okay, I'm just, it's hard for me to add and subtract when
The total
don't have
number
it all
isn't
in front
changed
of
though,
me.
the total number isn't changed, because even
more than
though we
5?
dropped down 8.5 ESOL positions, we increased special
Right,
ed
but if you
and
go back to that
CSR.
chart, I
Yeah.
think there was there was
In one.
extra at the bottom. I don't
That
think
was
it,
the
I don't think
removal
they
of the
equaled.
technology person.
Yeah,
It was-
it did.
It equaled?
Yes.
Can
It
you
was
pull
just
that
the
chart back
technology.
up with the numbers?
Oh, it has a deficit of one.
I thought it was a.
Deficit of one.
Great.
Okay,
It's
yeah,
the
so it
principals
is
for the
less.
new schools.
Yes.
And the,
And
yes.
office managers
Yes.
and
Oh,
the
and
athletic
the
director
library.
for high school 6.
But that's already a separate line on here, I thought, for 6.5, staffing for planning area of new schools, 6.5.
Okay,
See,
so
that's a
this-
separate line on this
Okay.
whole thing?
This is a
So it's
minus
not
one.
them.
So,
Right.
1 second, I'm trying to.
Susan, that's a minus
It was all
one, so
tied
Yeah.
out,
it
so.
doesn't equal.
Yeah, 'cause
Right,
it's-
so then
it's
this is
12.5.
actually gonna be 105.4 then, because it's also a deficit of one other position. So this is 105.4, and we're at 111.4 to approve.
So the ESOL coordinator is not listed on here.
So the
This is on
support
here.
position, those two support positions are on a separate line item, so there was a separate
Yeah.
attachment. This was just for the growth positions.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to make,
Have to double check, I
We
was
just
wanting
want,
to
we
see.
just want the number
Our
to
high
add
school
up.
ESOL
Yeah.
coordinator is on, no, that's a teacher ESOL, that's right, okay.
I just wanna know if we're approving 111.4 FTEs, we see 105.4 in what you gave us, but there's a deficit now of seven? Six, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get the answer.
And
Okay.
and if we can update this, because, I mean, I get it, it's
Yeah.
105, but it's not this 105.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's what I
don't-
explained before
yeah.
I,
Yeah.
Okay, somebody else asked for it anyway.
I'm the one that wants the accuracy.
This was what they had.
this was what
Somebody
tied
else
to the
wanted
school
like
board's
the
approved
starting
budget, so I
point
was
is
just
to compare it to when we get the
reprinting what was already
correct figure.
provided.
So,
Yes,
so we're gonna get
yes.
something in response to Dr. Chase's original question that shows the 111.
Yes.
Okay.
We were gonna update that, but
Okay,
we were just going through the changes.
Yeah.
And that was in the presentation, so all the attachments haven't been updated for the budget book yet.
okay,
And it would be interesting to me to know the difference with those ESOL, where they came out, whether, because we've got ESOL in elementary,
Elementary,
middle, and
middle,
high.
and high.
When I have an updated chart, then I can review
Yep.
it.
Sure.
thank you.
Thank you.
And I still just, ages ago, Mrs. Healy brought up the question of more paras, and I still continue to question a little bit. We added so many paras with grant funding, and now it's operating funding, and I'm just,
And it's still going up.
yeah, and it's still going up.
Yeah, I'd love to see, like, we've talked about it too, that, back when I started, they talked about some of them falling off due to attrition.
Yes.
But I
We
know
did that,
we've grown, and then I know that Virginia Literacy Act provided funding for some, so I'd like to see like kind of the addition and subtraction, like we eliminated these positions, but then these were funded by growth, and then we limited these positions, but then these were added back by Virginia literacy, or, you know, were needed for SPED, or like, whatever that looks like, so that we can see that even though it does appear that we're actually growing efficiently and taking into account where we have been able to make efficiencies with those positions.
And I
that-
see the three that are listed under high school have been reduced.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah, we could put together maybe a historical brief for you that
Yeah,
shows
like,
kind of.
obviously,
That was a level 2.
not like super urgent, but something that's almost like a
They
running
left in the
document moving
one.
forward. So that every year when we look at these numbers again, we can see how that's changing and how we're,
They
you know.
added, they didn't even move it.
And if any of those are being converted from like gen ed paras to sped paras, or like, you know,
But we're adding 15 level 2 paras in middle school, which I'm not questioning that. I'm assuming we're needing them. But we're saying in high school, we're actually reducing. Is that reducing from what we have currently? These are growth positions. So if we need 15 in middle school, are not some of those middle school students at level 2 going on to high school, and there's gonna be a need for that? I don't know, I don't have the numbers.
And we
where
did,
they
we take
are.
the three from the
But-
high
but
school
we're-
and move them?
We took away the growth positions at level 2 at high school, is that correct? There's no growth positions for level 2 paras at high school.
So
Am I
actually,
reading this
that
correctly?
would be one of the numbers that we would update on this chart. As part of the summary that was provided here, this described
at
shifts. This described a shift in how the teacher position allocation would look. We can update what it would look like in terms of the grade level split for paraprofessionals.
Adjustments.
There's a jet landing on the plane.
So are the
I don't know.
paras SOQ, they're not SOQ positions?
Paras are part of the local staffing standard. They are not, there is an SOQ regarding special education paraprofessionals, but our local standard exceeds it.
I mean, if I look at a document, I'm only gonna be able to look at it in the text of other documents that I have. And looking at this, it appears that we are not only not projecting a need for growth positions of paras in high school, we're reducing the high school, but yet we projecting a need of 15, 17 in elementary, which is, covers what, six grades, and then 15 in middle, which to me is a lot for 3 grades. That means we have a high number of students with that need, but yet a reduction in high school. So that's all I've.
Yep,
does
and-
any of
and
it
these are
relate
based
to
on-
not having a day school program at middle school where we're trying to better accommodate them in a general, in a, least restrictive environment, more, normal 6-8 environment rather than day school?
I mean, it's based on some student needs, right, in terms of
Sure.
accommodate, it's also based on the staffing standard that you approved in terms of how we've gotten to these numbers. Based on our student numbers, based on the staffing standards that we put these together, and so,
That's something that also.
yeah, we're happy to update this, and
Well, I really think that's something.
this hasn't been provided, when was the last time we provided this?
In February for our school board approved work session.
So,
Look
yeah.
at the staffing standards, see where we are, where we're going.
We're gonna have to fix the ESOL.
We'll update the whole thing for you.
We had the outcome that we expected.
I think that's a good conversation. You wanna say that out loud so it doesn't get put on an agenda?
Missy, Maureen and Maya, can you guys put on an agenda item for a work session, a review of the staffing standards so that we can get a better idea of this?
Honestly, because she brought up a great point, we've had them going for a while, it's good to evaluate, is this a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or
Well, that's a good idea.
And
do
what's
that
the
in the
input
fall.
from the principals too?
Yeah.
I'd
Don't we
like
do
to-
that every fall?
And,
go through the
When we
staffing
look at the
standards? I don't know
students,
that
we
we
look at
do.
the
I don't know that we've
accommodation
gone
plan.
through.
so
I
I
don't think
know
so.
Mr. Burnett and
I think we did it
the
one time, voted on it.
the HR team did a review, they did bring it to FAPC, I feel like a few months ago.
Right, January or February, we did a presentation of the status of staffing standard implementation.
And then I also know his team has been working with principals to get feedback on our current staffing standards, so we can.
Like
Well,
what's
I
working,
think
what's
as we
working,
move
what's not,
into a
what's still a
5-year
priority.
plan, a new 5-year plan, like,
We
that's
should have a conversation about it.
conversations about what that might look like and what might inform those decisions for the next
Yeah.
5-year plan.
Well, especially since next year's the last year, we kind of need to know
Exactly.
where
Of the
we are
strategic
on
plan
both.
and the budget.
And I
yeah.
think the strategic plan's the year after.
Are we in a
Is
good
it?
place right now for budget? We'll take a quick
Yes.
break,
Yes.
refill, or you know,
Or
or
more
restroom, and then we'll do
And we
our
can-
Chromebook conversation.
Yeah.
Free and reduced lunch. I know, I'm trying to,
5-minute recess.
Yes, yeah. So I'm trying to think.
I know, a rainy day like this.
Oh, I know, I want a cup of tea and a book. Dr. Smith.
That's right, okay. And they keep using
Been digging into this, kind of taking a deeper dive into Chromebooks, including replacement in terms of summer collection, all of that. And so I know you are scheduled to take action on those one-time funds that will allow us to have that replacement cycle. Also with us, we're looking at that cliff that's coming down the road too, because of the large purchase with Chromebooks several years ago during COVID. And so Dr. Stemple is coming as chief of schools. He's been helping with the technology department. Hunter Matheson is here as well as we talk through these items, so we can answer some questions and just talk with you about the plan in terms of Chromebook replacement here. So here's Dr. Stemple. He's gonna kick us off.
Good afternoon, or morning still, I guess. So what presenting to you is deploying our Chromebook fleet across the division. Some planning topics that we went through this document is high school summer collection. This is a new process. We're gonna collect all high school Chromebooks for the first time. A lot of times they would go home for the summer, that type of thing. So we are going to collect them all this summer, which presents its own challenges, but I feel like it's the best check-in of our technology. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about that later. We have to do a better job of checking in on our technology. I think we do a better job checking on old textbooks probably, so that's one of the processes that we'll talk about shortly. Middle school options, and then the elementary school K through 5. Oops. Chromebook storage and student access, annual device checkouts and collection, and then our sustainability and survivability are managing our Chromebook program. We'll start with the elementary schools. What we're looking at is Chromebooks kept in classroom-specific charts. Charts. One cart per 2 classrooms, K1, where practical. When I say where practical, we do have a few elementary schools where perhaps K1 and K and 1 are not on the same sides of the building, so it may not be as easy, but where practical, that is our plan. Each student has a designated device checked out to them, 2 through 5, but they're kept in the cart. There may be an occasion as the students get a little older where they may go home overnight for specific reasons, but it would not be a general thing where they're checked out and just sent home on a regular basis or given to them. And there's some advantages to that. In the elementary school, we can control our screen time more, and then breakage from transport obviously is minimized somewhat. People in the wrong button. Middle schools. We are looking at checking out Chromebooks to the individual students for the year. They'd be responsible for them daily, fully charged. And they're responsible for returning damaged devices for repair. And then they're collected at the end of each year, just like the high schools. We are preparing for students for high school. We don't want to have barriers for take-home availability, as they are used extensively.
Do students have the option of leaving them at school if they don't want to take them home?
We do not have enough carts for that, so we wouldn't have an opportunity to place them in a charging cart or something where it wouldn't have that. And to keep in mind that middle school students often leave from a classroom that they don't go back to the next morning because they're moving around the building.
Oh, for X and Y.
Or they may end in PE, for example, and not have, or wherever, so.
Do we provide any type of cover for them if they want to take them home? You know, like.
Nope.
No.
So they just take it if they drop it at snow?
Backpack it.
Something. Yeah. Sorry, it's gone. Okay.
High schools, same thing, we check them out, the individual students for the year. They're responsible for bringing devices daily, fully charged. They're responsible for returning, same thing, we continue with the same thing we've done at high school. no difference, no proposed changes there.
Do we track how much we spend on repairs annually?
We do. So we have about 187,000 a year in parts, and I can bring up the hours of labor and transport.
Yeah, cause I was gonna say the labor, if we could just maybe get that in the bulletin, I think that might be interesting to know. I mean, I think it's just that people don't realize that it's not just purchasing the equipment, it's maintaining the equipment, and there are long-term expenditures, so.
And we're only thinking Chromebooks, when in actuality, teachers have their own laptops, their portable devices, they have classroom devices, screens on the walls, projectors, all of those things are all still part of the consideration
And
of
what's our
technology.
replacement cycle on some of that too?
We don't have one.
Yeah, we, some of them.
When
we
it
do.
breaks, we replace it.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're gonna talk through some of that
And they
stuff at the
finish-
end.
yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna talk through
yeah.
some strategies and some things we wanna do
Yeah.
moving forward.
Some of the benefits, annual device collection is inventory verification. That's something I think we need to do a better job of verifying, instead of giving a kid a Chromebook at the beginning of ninth grade and not verifying its existence yearly or bi-yearly, semester check-in, if you would. We're giving them some
Yeah.
expensive equipment, and we need to I know that's a lot to ask of a principal, but as former principal, I think it should be something we should want to do. Helps keep a track of that inventory. It also allows for cleaning, updates, repairs, and I think it does help prevent the damage and the loss over summer break.
And if
But that
students
could
don't
also
come
be done
back.
sickly
And if
ways,
students
so-
don't come back, then we have to chase them down. A student moves, a student who just,
Right, makes sense.
and I know some of the principals are doing it for the first time this year, and we're gonna see how that goes, but, if student A gives me a Chromebook, student A gets that Chromebook back, again, ownership, so, we're gonna see how that goes at some of our schools. We're not, you're not turning in a nice Chromebook that you've taken care of and getting something else back, so we're hoping that ownership, that goes well, and we can produce some ownership, establish some ownership for the Chromebook they are getting, especially in the middle school.
Why would we not do that in all our schools this year?
A lot of it's just been staff, it's the first time we collect them all in the high schools, and I don't think they're all ready for that, so.
But
I
how
know
I think the
Dr.
elementary
Dr.
school
Robertson was
students are
gonna
always
talk
taking
to
Chromebooks.
Middle
the high
school-
school principals
Middle
about it.
schools are gonna be collecting all of theirs.
Yes, yeah.
Elementary schools collecting all of theirs, okay.
And high
But
schools as
elementary
well.
school students don't take their phone.
Yeah.
Correct.
Ms. Reinhardt, so my understanding, we've done that in elementary, high, and middle, we've always collected them, we have it in high school, and that's what we're doing this year.
So how many high schools are going to collect them?
All of
All
them.
of them.
All of them are
Oh, I thought you
collecting
said
them,
they weren't gonna do it this year. They were
No,
gonna
just
do it
about-
this year.
assuming you're getting the same one back that you turned in.
That's unfortunate.
Right. This,
Why
Dr.
is that
Robertson was
unfortunate?
speaking to the principals
Because from what
tomorrow
he
about
said,
the
like,
process.
you could end up with winning the unlucky lottery and
Right.
getting a Chromebook that was not well maintained by the
Well, like
person
if
before
you're,
you.
so in other words, if you're an incoming ninth grader, you could be getting an outgoing 12th graders
Well, that would be
computer.
the case no matter what. We
Right,
don't- we
but
don't give
that's
her
what I'm
a new
saying is
game.
that you won't, just because you took care of yours, you're now, as a ninth grader, you're gonna be at
A
the
new
mercy
school,
of a
right.
s-
We're not
senior.
But, like-
transferring from the middle school to high school, we're
Right,
not
right.
carrying
But
that.
as a sophomore, will they, they will or they won't get their same Chromebook back when they're a junior?
At some of the schools, they will. Not
They're
all the
not.
schools.
I have
For
thought-
example, North Stafford has to take all of theirs off-site this year because North Stafford is kind of,
Yeah, because they're shutting down for
Yeah.
repairs.
But
so
I
to
have
expect to take 2,000 off-site with names attached and bring 2,000 back and get them to the same kids may be nearly impossible. But
Wow.
Dr. Snow, I think Hunter had something to add in the back.
I was gonna mention, ninth graders will always get a new one.
That's what I
A
thought.
new one,
Yeah,
okay.
that's what
The last
they
4
said.
years, we've done
Yeah.
new devices.
Okay,
So going forward, and I won't speak for the new technology person. Going forward, the recommendation is that ninth grader would keep that Chromebook, so when they turn in at the end of the summer, they're gonna get the same one back in 10th grade.
gotcha, thank you.
And I'll just
That
say, like
makes sense.
logistically, this has been a big push for our high schools to take all these in, store them,
Yeah.
check on them. We would like to give the same one back. I think we're just now at the point we can't commit 100% to that for this year. We would like to, I think they're gonna look at that. Dr. Robertson's gonna work with principals to see if we can make that happen, but just where we are right now, just full transparency, I don't think we're
And
able
then
to.
for children who are in credit recovery or new credit, will they essentially check theirs in and then get it right back, for lack of better language? Rather
summer
than
school?
checking it in for the summer and then,
I
What do
don't
they
want to
get?
answer that question for you.
Hunter, you said yes?
Most likely, I'd say. It's-
Like a
it-
quick
it-
check, because they're gonna need it. I think honestly, summer classes start technically before spring classes end. So to be without a device for any period of time would be a struggle for those students, particularly the ones that are relying on credit recovery.
Yeah, and it's similar to our assistive technology users,
Okay.
where there really isn't a good break.
Right.
Can we just talk about how we track breakage in terms of, like, if I've got the same kid coming to me and he's gotten 3 Chromebooks because he keeps breaking it, what's our, like, what do we do? Do we track? Like, hey, Johnny's, this is your 4th Chromebook this year, Johnny, we certainly can't give you another one, so are we tracking that?
And I don't have a good answer, because that would be at the school level.
Yeah, so I think we need to find that out, because we need to find out, I mean, it's one thing if you break it one time, I get it, oops, excuse me, I tripped, but I can't keep giving you new Chromebooks.
Every 9 weeks.
Well,
Without,
So then the
without,
question is there a policy and a
And
regulation?
keep in mind,
maybe, and a
Big answer.
repayment, at some point, we're gonna have to hold you financially responsible for this Chromebook.
keep in mind that you're using the term breakage, which covers a lot of things. They're not all coming back broke. Some of them are, right, or they're older technologies that we're trying to keep together, older platforms, and Hunter can speak to that better than I can as far as the software isn't working properly. It has nothing to do with the kid.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about break, like
And Ms.
broken.
Halsted, I can assure, when I've talked with principals about this, if they can show the kid did it intentionally, they're charging them.
Okay.
Sometimes they're trying to
Like
work
this new
through it.
TikTok
Was it,
challenge.
was it was it intentional that you dropped it? Was it intentional, did you throw it? Did you drop it? What happened? If we can show that the kid did it intentionally, we are charging them for that device.
And there's a little bit
Right,
of,
but if it's the same kid, and he keeps saying, I'm sorry, I dropped it again,
And you hand them 4 textbooks and say, here are
correct,
these.
yeah.
well, I'll also say that
Welcome to
there is like a
1985,
bit
son.
of a sense of pride, because a lot of times the loaners are like the little kid Chromebooks and not the big kid Chromebooks. So everybody knows, like, your Chromebook is broken and now you're on this like elementary school, smaller, less cool Chromebook, as
We
it
should
were.
put like heart stickers on them and paint them.
Oh, they put a lot of stickers
I'm
on
all
their
for
own.
that.
Like,
I'm all for that.
I mean, it should definitely
yeah.
be embarrassing.
Yeah.
It
Let's
it
go
is
with that.
very evident that you do not have the proper Chromebook, and people, I'm surprised at how much they care.
That sounds like Chromebook shaming.
I was just gonna say, I don't wanna draw attention, it's like
I was
we're saying
thinking that.
Cheese sandwiches.
Life is filled with all kinds of struggles.
I'm sure that it won't be long before we're told we can't do that.
Hey, if it makes them pay for them, then they're gonna have to pay for stuff, and for us to not to do that.
So here's just a quick analysis. You guys read, about 1 in 3 student devices are submitted for repair annually.
Ooh, wow.
And this does put a heavy strain on the technical staff. You've asked about that. And like I said, Hunter does have the hours, but it broke it, but it would,
And I
We'll
have
give-
them now.
there you go.
So it is, this year, up to about a week and a half ago, 11,772 hours for just the central IT technicians. It doesn't count the individuals in the buildings. And that's included, and that is, in addition to that, 1,116 hours of transport time back and forth from the schools to where we can do the centralized repairs.
Hunter, does that include I know we have some students that come down in there and work, does that include all of those too?
Yeah, so that's 6 full-time and 3 part-time people. So, and the bulk of, let's say the bulk, but there's a lot of intern work over the summer, because so much of this we don't discover until we get them all back. And
Well, I know in the past, since we have not been collecting all of them, but they still have been doing a lot of work over the summer, what's that gonna look like now that we're taking them all in for internships and, costs of repairs and what have you? What kind of team is that gonna take versus what we've been doing in the past? Or do you
this
get the
with
same
Ford
team?
Center?
just for like the crunch during the summer,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, it's as many student interns as we can afford. That's how we bolster the numbers. So otherwise, it's the same, but it's the same district technicians that are working on things like the collections, deploying new devices, whether it's desktops or Chromebooks. So it's a crunch.
Mm.
You see less repairs in elementary schools since they don't take them home.
Dramatically so. And looking at data of schools that have gone from no cards to cards, it's at least cut in half.
Oh.
And usually it's a little bit more than that.
So, I was under the impression at the beginning of the year that that's what we were aiming for in middle school. And I feel like that's where we started, and then obviously with certain types of class, we might have the exception of a child saying, I need to take mine home, otherwise I can't keep up. And that would be the exception to the rule. But now, I have 2 middle schoolers with Chromebooks all the time. And I don't have a sense of when that changed, it's just all of a sudden went from, I need it for this project to, I have it all the time. And I don't know why we moved away from where we were in keeping them in middle school, especially because our rate of damage at middle school was higher per capita
Yeah.
compared to other levels.
My middle school was the best example, because that we have like a full year of, they didn't use carts, this year they did use carts, and that's, when we talk about less than half, that was a big
So,
part of that.
I
That's
can't,
huge
and I think Stacy's back there, right? Yeah,
I
Ms.
am.
Johnson's here. So we did have 2 middle schools try, try out the carts, and look at that, and we got feedback from those schools, and Ms. Johnson can speak to it. I think, there was a lot of concerns that came out from the principals, the teachers, and the staff there about just the instructional, impact that it had, and so, you know, I think where we are now is, we don't think that the carts at the middle school are the best way to move forward instructionally. I think that if it does present some opportunities if they don't need to take it home every night, but at the same time, when we're looking at what our teachers needs and our staff needs, I mean, they were talking about the needs that kids have to access materials online if they're studying at home, or they have hard copy stuff as well, but just some of the materials are not accessible to kids when they leave, and they've seen a struggle with that. And so, Stacy, I don't know if you wanna add to that?
No, I mean, the summary of the survey results clearly indicate that staff feel like our students who weren't permitted to take devices home each evening were at a disadvantage. And they
Is
felt-
there any way that we can, instead of doing an all or nothing approach, that we can do like a step approach? 6th grades keep them at school, 7th grades check them out, 8th grades take them home?
That was an option that we did discuss.
Okay.
The first, plan A overwhelmingly is that each middle
Everybody,
school
everything?
student have a device that they can take home. If that's not the plan that we were able to go with, then we talked about a tiered system.
So,
I
I mean, for me, it's a question of it is a question of money and human resources really
Yes.
at this point in time.
Perfect.
And so I think that if difficult decisions have to be made, they have to be made. And whereas I hate to take that out, we might have to ask our teachers to find a way to make sure that anything that's internet-based gets done during the school day and everything else goes home as homework. Because at the end of the day, we are looking at addressing the critical budget shortfalls, and how do we do that? And so every dollar allocated at each part of our system is important. And I don't wanna say this being, like, I don't mean to sound crass saying it, but sometimes it can't be about convenience, right? Or what may or may not be easier, like, we may need you to think on the fly because this is not a cheap price tag. And we already know what the problem is in middle school, right? And it's not their fault because it's who they are. So nobody's blaming them, right? But then it is up to the adults to say, we can't afford to keep appeasing middle school students. We have to find a way around that.
And
That's
I would
just my
be-
feeling.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm concerned about too is that I would really like to know how the technology is used instructionally.
Right.
And I
Really
think we don't have a very good grasp on that, because it's clearly an expense we have, not just in purchasing, but maintaining and following up, and the staff required. And I just would like to get a better grasp of what our instructional use is
Mhm.
and where it's really necessary, so that maybe we can address some of these other questions.
Yeah.
And I would be okay with like selecting the right technology for the student based on the class that they're taking. Cause even at the high school level, don't we have some kids in some of like the CAD type classes where they're not even on Chromebooks, or they get in addition to Chromebooks, a different laptop who's like, I don't know the
I
specs.
think it's, there's a lab and they work on it in the lab.
And so, yeah,
But I think
They
that
don't
those
take those
students,
home.
I
No,
don't,
they
do.
sometimes
They
do,
now?
because I don't know what math or science or art class my kid was in at Brook Point, but the Chromebook could not be used at home for any of their homework. They had to get a Mac. I believe it was a Mac, I could be wrong, but they
That's
got a
what
Mac.
my
that they
memory was
brought
that it was a
home.
Mac as well.
But it took many months of the teacher requesting, or, going through the hoops, doing the right thing, and my kid was like, I still can't do the work because of having only the Chromebook, and then finally they got the other computer that was better for the software or whatever. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, and it's not one size fits all, unfortunately, which makes it really, really hard for all of us. But, and I'm so glad that we're instituting something different, because how we track what these students do, because when that kid graduated, she did not turn in her Chromebook or her other thing. I turned it in when I found it after they were in college, many, many months later, and I never got hounded. But when they had textbooks that were due, I got hounded for those textbooks. I got sent that bill, my kid got shamed. You ain't doing this, you're not going to prom without this textbook from 2 years ago. And we were able to maintain that. But now all of a sudden with Chromebooks that cost a lot more per than a textbook, we can't do that. That to me, I don't understand the disconnect, it doesn't make sense, I do not believe.
And it's one device, it's not four.
Yeah, but you get what I'm saying, the one device costs a heck of a lot more than what we're paying for one book, but I got letters home for that library book or whatever, and I didn't get anything that my kid basically stole these things that I did find in their closet, and I did turn them in, but
No, but
we
it's
gotta do a better job.
it is an accountability piece, and to speak to the needs of the high school kids we get are a little bit higher as they get into those more specialized classes. And so I'd rather know that we're saving money and we're being more fiscally responsible at the middle school level to support being able to move that around. Again, to speaking to the personnel issue, like 11,000 hours just from central office, I'm gonna put it at 12,000, cause I'm gonna round up for you, because the number was so ridiculous anyway. But in repair time and repair costs on a staff, that's how big? The size of my, like the number of fingers?
6 full-time people and 3
Yeah.
interns.
Seriously, so that to me,
No, 3
It feels
part-time
like
plus
elves in the toy shop, like you better
it
get to
totally
this.
is. It totally is, but the thing is that again, we're asking, and I feel like it's easier to put the onus on the adults in the room, which is the teachers, to say, we need to focus on ways that we can be, that if we're giving homework, it's not Chromebook reliant. I don't know how hard that is, but I know we did it for 1,000 years, we figured out how to give homework out. And I just think for the middle school, we have to figure that question out. I don't know if we need to run the numbers, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Susan,
no.
on the cost savings that actually is, but if we're reducing 50% of our repairs just by leaving them on a cart, nobody in this room can overlook that.
Well, I will say, we have
That's
several
not a small
strategies
number.
we'd like to present as part of the
No,
presentation that we
Okay.
can share that includes,
Can I
but
just ask
What?
one other thing though, is that we put on here major advantages in elementary school screen time, and I know all of us have spoken about screen time, and it's not put on here for anything else. Now, I feel like having them over the summer is helping with, potentially, could be, helping with screen time, because we don't provide the accessibility. But I feel like having middle schoolers, again, they're probably your ones most on social media because it's brand new for them, or, you know, a couple years old for them. But I feel like holding Chromebooks is also part of screen time.
If you allow us to go through this,
Yeah,
I'll talk
sorry.
about screen
Yeah.
time.
Yay,
Just-
Okay,
thank
let's
you.
stay on track, what's the matter
If
with
you
you?
allow us to go through the presentation, we'll talk about
Let
it.
us talk,
and then
We've got a
things go
strategy
off the
there
rails.
too.
Everybody's
Okay.
staying on track today.
So, some managing for this Chromebook that we probably, that we still need to talk about. First of all, we do nothing in respect the tech program. There's no, we do very little as far as, we're giving you a device and then it's just,
That's it.
that's it. We don't do anything
Do
about it.
we
So
sign
I've
a
been working
contract
with-
when they get the device, like, these are your responsibilities with the device?
That's what he's saying.
Yeah, we need to do more about the respect the program. We're giving you a Chromebook that you need to take care of. What's that involve? And then should minimize travel in and out of the building, minimize travel within the building. These are things we could possibly do. We do need to talk about fees, discussions, consequences when devices are lost or damaged. Back to Alyssa's comment, Ms. Halstead's comments about if the same kid has multiple, do you lose your Chromebook privilege? And everything you gets passed out. We have to look at consequences and monitoring our failure points. Again, they're not always broken devices. As these get older, the systems don't work, and then we have a lot of that. Instilling some ownership, and then of course, in what we're purchasing, make sure we're purchasing. Sometimes you get what you pay for when you go with cheaper models. And let's be honest, and we try to stretch our money as far as we can, but we can get more for cheaper, but sometimes you need to think about the durability of it.
And the capability of it too,
Right.
right?
These are things that we are looking at. You're hiring a new chief technology officer soon, the screen time usage. We're looking at rolling out parent light speed access for this coming school year. That is the access for parents to know exactly the screen time of their children
On that device,
on the device they have.
correct, because they have other devices.
Well, that's, I mean, if they give them a cell phone, that's their problem,
And-
it's not ours, but I'm
Right,
saying,
right,
as far as,
accountability, correct.
and, Dr. Smith's familiar with this as a parent and his previous, stops, so he can speak to Lightspeed Access, we are looking at rolling that out for our parents, this coming school year.
And it does, so it allows parents to sign up, parents can get weekly, daily reports, what sites are my kids on, how many times they go to that site. It's got a lot of different features that we're working through now.
Cause like that's the type of thing that we can look at if we look at our child's device.
It's a
But
feature, yeah.
if the device is not home all the time, this allows us to check that even when the device isn't.
Yeah, and the parent would have, so we have some features to set up. I don't wanna speak too much about the settings all with it yet because we're working through all that.
Sure.
But, usually, the way I did, I could turn my child's Chromebook off when they were out of school if I wanted to and not allow them they couldn't have access to it. I could get a weekly report, I believe you get I get a weekly report, I think you can get a daily report too. So it's a feature that we have and we are looking forward to rolling that out. We'll do a lot of communication with parents about it because they would have to go in and sign up and they can have access to some of that.
Back to school night, sign up?
Yeah, so
I mean,
we're
that's
gonna
when you have the
communicate it
most
over
in
the
the
summer
building.
and just so they're ready to roll out. We wanna work with principals about it and our CPT so they understand them, so everybody's, our tech folks, everybody can support parents with that.
At all levels,
Mhm.
that's for,
Yep.
because that first parent-teacher conference is the way to confirm elementary
Yes.
parents are on it and then get them to value that feedback early. We won't need to work so hard to get them to stay enrolled
Well,
moving
it's
forward.
just it, it's been 5 years and I feel like in a lot of ways, kids have become more casual about having Chromebooks. And they're not taking
Yeah.
as good a care of them as they did
Right.
when we initially got them.
And so I think to go back to Dr. Stemple's point, we do need to do more work around respecting the tech and putting some of those structures in place. I think it also gets to his next point, just around how teachers utilize these materials. We rolled these out in the midst of COVID. There wasn't training on and professional development on how do you choose what resources are best, how do you make some of those selections, and so I've talked with Mr. Bowling about it and also with our professional learning department about how do we provide some of that support for teachers and make not just what's easiest, right, on a Chromebook or technology, but what's gonna be most effective and how do we make some of those distinctions and some of those
But to go back to
decisions.
the parent Lightspeed and tying it in with that or whatever, so the parents will be able to see like what platforms the teachers are utilizing in the classroom, right? At
Yeah,
that
they'll be able to see what
particular
sites they
point?
go to, so like for my child, I could see, did they go to the Learning Mate, did they go to Canvas, and, how many times they go to that, did they go to Google, or there was different sites, so.
But they can also see if the kid is trying to get around our systems,
Like
like
go to YouTube and watch.
like
Yeah, so-
creating
Lego.
VPNs.
Right, so we're
Yeah.
anticipating there might be, I see this how did my child get around to this? And so we would be able to respond and say, hey, no, we see that's happening, and so there'll also be some access with our tech folks on the back end to kind of take a look at some of that too.
And will there be a buffer between the parent and the teacher if the parent comes in, like, why is my kid constantly on this Chromebook in your classroom? I'm just curious too, right? Like, there has to be a kind of a buffer to,
Well, we do
so
have
the
to have a
teacher's not
process,
constantly,
correct.
yeah, the
Yeah.
teacher's not constantly
There has to be
fielding
a
like.
process.
Feeling the heat. of the
Yeah, well,
parent
yes,
over-
yes, like
We're
wondering why.
justifying
And
what they're
thank you, that's
doing.
what I was just
Yeah.
gonna say, having to
Yeah.
justify constantly, make sure there's a little buffer in there too for them.
Are there any expectations with learning management system use at the middle school and the high school level?
There is, and Mr. Bowling, I don't know if you can speak to, or it looks like Dr. Robertson's back there as well, in terms of expectations for Canvas at the middle school and high school level.
I don't know that we have any specific expectations as it pertains to Canvas. I think generally we want teachers to engage in it and utilize it as a resource. I'm not sure prior to my arrival if we provided like a shell of a course for teachers to use to build off of in each content area.
So it's extensively used in the high school,
Mhm.
first of all. We have created over 35 different course shells for courses for teachers that are new, and they come in and they can make a copy of it and add and subtract what they want to cater their course to the needs of their kids and to their curriculum. At the middle school level, I would say that it's highly implemented and highly used pretty frequently and consistently. Maybe not quite at the level of high schools. and we have some but few users in the elementary level.
I mean, I just, it's frustrating if, there's certain basic information that should just be available on the learning management system from every teacher. And so I'm just curious, do we have something like there is a syllabus, or your due dates are there, or,
We do extensively, especially for the high enrollment courses. There are some, so for instance, a course like AP Calculus, that the curriculum of that course is really determined by the College Board. And so we really just copy and paste those into our shell, but yes, across the board, almost every course has some guidance.
The other, and I don't wanna, lease versus purchase,
That, Chris Palmer's team's been looking, procurement's been looking into this option. It's kind of something that's, I would say, in the exploratory stages. It hasn't.
Do we find any pros or cons, one way or the other? What we're doing working, we need to change it?
Yeah, so right now, we're reaching out to other school divisions.
Okay.
We already have been for several weeks, that are currently leasing, and trying to determine, like, all right, well, what analysis did you do when you went to leasing versus buying? What we're finding out is there wasn't a whole lot of analysis done, and like, I wanna see a cost analysis of purchasing versus buying. So that's what my team is working on. And so they're gathering the contracts, what are the costs of leasing, like that we're paying out, but then, all right, so we save some bucks, but then what happens, is that a 3-year, 4-year contract? Right now, we have our Chromebooks for longer than that. But then on our Chromebooks, we have maybe more repair costs because we're keeping them longer. So there's a lot that goes into that, a lot of pros and cons, and so we're trying to pull all that information together. It's just not a quick
Okay.
and some of that is when we looked at the repair costs, if we leased them, they would repair them and get them back, right, so we wouldn't have all
But
that.
then
So-
we're down
But again, yeah,
substantial
so how long
amounts.
does that lease last? So it is a lot to take into.
What's the
where-
turnaround time?
Right.
Assuming that if we have to send a Chromebook in to be repaired, they're giving us a loaner Chromebook as well within that lease agreement. But also comparing, like, if we're comparing our school system to Spotsy or one of the others in county that, and I'm only using them because they're next door. But the smaller ones, it's a big difference because we have a gajillion students, right? So I don't know if that would make our plan
And also,
better or
like, we don't
worse,
know-
right? Like, the more you have, the more students you have, the better your deal, like, whatever program.
I think we
but-
heard from a variety of one. I know like some of the larger ones we've definitely heard from. And
Well, my other question would be like, what is the ratio between staff to manage the Chromebooks and the number of Chromebooks? Like Spotsy might be smaller than us, but if they still have 6 full-time, 3 part-time, then they're able to
Well, and
hit
that was my
those
other question,
repairs
is how does
better.
it impact our hours? Like, or
Yeah.
how many office hours, like, how many of these 11,000, 12,000 hours are we saving if we do a lease price?
Well,
so to your point earlier about the technology project manager, that's another reason we put it on hold. Let's
Yeah.
like to see, like, if
Yeah.
we went with the leasing option, if that, like, maybe that frees up some staff to do some other things. And so
Right.
really just wanted to look at the whole picture and, we are looking forward to a new chief technology officer coming in with that perspective that has done some of this work that can really help us to
And their
dig in.
background is more the instructional side, correct?
Yes.
and, a question I would also have too is.
Well, no, but I think that's been part of the
Like,
problem. is
I
that
guess
we-
I would worry in the
we need
leasing,
to
and maybe
focus
it's
on
nothing to
getting
worry
rid of those
about,
two sides.
but in the leasing, when we have high stress test time, making sure that we have everything we need for the students to, like, if we've
Yeah.
sent a bunch out and we are coming up on our testing season, it's like, oh, are we good?
They'll continue to look at the student internships, the student engagement, and then again, the new chief of technology, working with our communications team, kind of that culture shift to one of ownership. Instead of this is just
A piece of paper.
or treating like a textbook kind of, you get it back and we don't.
Well, I was surprised there wasn't like a contract, like,
Yes.
this is your computer, you're signing for it, your parents are signing for it,
Right.
and you're
Well,
responsible
Because
for
they
it.
think it's a right, not a privilege, to
Right.
have that
Yeah.
Chromebook, so that's the problem that we've
Yeah.
created, and that's the culture shift.
Well, we created it
You're
when
not
we-
entitled
We
to
see that
this
with cell
Chromebook.
phone,
Well,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
if we require it for academics, then we're gonna have to provide it.
Keep in mind how we originally had.
But we
it
don't
set up.
have to require it.
Drive by.
Right, exactly.
We
Yeah.
only
We don't
require
have
it
to
for
require it.
testing
That's a
and
separate discussion.
But like you say though, shifting part of the respect for the tech, if we have you sign a contract, it also helps us in the discipline when, you know, a kid does something, it's like, hey, you signed a contract, your parents signed it, this is what's gonna happen.
It
People
is the
cannot
zero
sign
consequence
contracts unless
mode we
they're
have.
18.
Well, then their parent will, yeah,
But the code of
Behavior
conduct,
agreement.
Unless they're emancipated.
right.
And we created this a little bit because the way we originally rolled this out, we had no plan prior to COVID. People drove by and we basically handed them a device through a window.
Sure did.
And,
Yeah, it was awesome.
and they drove on and it was not,
Hope to see you again.
yeah, I mean,
We did
and,
actually,
we crash course teachers on how to use and teach via technology in a 2-week period. And they all had to learn Canvas quickly, and so there is some, I don't know if we recovered from that as educators, to be honest.
I know.
But I think there's also been gaps in helping teachers learn how to use the technology effectively. Because I think it's always been reactive since we've gotten one.
So this time next year, we should be in a good position to make some evaluations, or hopefully earlier than this time next year when.
And I think also
person
what
replaces-
Dr. Warner talked about, like the
If you want
instructional
to.
piece to come back with some things, absolutely.
Well,
This
so
is
wait,
more
then the question
involving-
is, the
it
money that was
Professional development too, I
allocated,
think, around the use of the technology. So teachers are using it more effectively, maybe then they don't go back and forth as much.
So the money that's allocated, I think she already asked, the oldest Chromebooks are all in the middle schools. And they all need to be replaced. And that would be $2.2 million, and they're all the oldest ones are in the middle school. And Hunter can speak to that a little bit. And then we have some older ones in the elementary school to replace those oldest ones. And then we have some still old classroom desktop computers, and that's another replacement issue there. So there's your reallocated money, if that's what you're asking
so
about.
what I was gonna ask is, I think it's ironic that it's $3.1 million and there's not even a single high school kid accounted for up here. Which is the group that we are asking to most heavily rely on.
We use
Chromebooks.
BPSA funds for those.
Okay, but then my question is, if we allocate this money out and replace all these things now, what's the point of the lease versus purchase, because you're good for the next 5 years, right? I'm
Could be.
asking that,
Could be, that's part of the, I mean,
okay.
So how many computers did we buy for the high school with the other funds? What percentage did we replace for the high school?
High schools.
So it's one grade level per year.
You
Oh,
gotta
so
put
we
that-
buy
Yeah.
one grade
Yeah,
level
we
per
buy the
year,
freshman.
okay.
So the freshman
So it's a
class always has
recurring.
the newest.
So it's a
That
recurring,
BPSA
okay.
tech is
Zero.
Okay.
a little less than
Okay,
900,000.
what is the value to us of the middle school ones once we replace them? Can we use them for parts, or, I know they're the oldest,
ones.
but,
Yeah.
or the.
Oh my God, we're gonna black market
No,
computer
no,
parts.
no.
I see
So
it.
some of them-
I
Gonna have an
see it.
eBay store.
But I
Etsy
think
store.
especially with this kind of purchase for the middle school is a
Yeah,
great
I
time
know
to
why we
implement a
did it.
stronger respect the tech policy because they're getting new computers.
and
Yeah.
Sandra's team's on board, we're trying to come up with kind of a little bit of
Messaging.
a messaging, you know, something that's
Well, I agree.
catchy.
Some type of a contract with the parents.
I think these are the
Before we,
rules.
particularly in the middle school, we could start this out as a pilot with the middle school.
And
since
ninth
we're
grade.
gonna be, if in fact we're able to do this and
Yeah,
we're
ninth
handing
grade.
out brand new computers to every middle school parent. Every
I mean,
child.
Do the
yeah,
PTA
and like the ninth
We should
graders,
have
when the
some
ninth
PTA
graders,
Yes.
and then you get their new
carry,
computers too.
We
you
can
know,
do that this
spirit
year.
wear bags
Yes,
for the
I agree.
Chromebooks that people could purchase.
That would
Sometimes,
be
no,
Maybe,
we
but
do.
not, I don't know of any
I've never
schools
seen
that
them
my
do it,
kids
that
have
might
gone
be a
to.
good help
But I
for
also
them.
think you need to
Especially with
understand,
those
like,
kids throwing
the
their
first year my
backpacks.
kid was given a Chromebook, or like after we got back into schools, I was like, here, you can have it back, I don't want them to have it. And then I'm told, well, you have to, like, so you need something for that parent who's gonna argue it. I'd much rather supply my own laptop for my kid, let y'all put your little giggy gaggy stuff on there to keep it a boring laptop, and then I don't have to pay anything when it breaks. Cause it's already mine, I've got my own Geek Squad or whatever, like, what is gonna be
Our
your
policy right
response
now
to
says
people
no
like that
external-
who don't, or
Yeah,
someone
It
who
says no.
doesn't want
Or
it?
do
Um,
the
because-
So currently, we do not allow folks to bring their own technology.
That's what you
And-
think, but I'm telling you what I did because I wasn't.
Well, it's our
No,
new
last
policy when we
year.
did the cell
Okay.
phone.
So
Yeah.
I do think, again, with our chief technology officer, looking at that and see, I mean, is there opportunity to do that? Part of the piece is honestly, and we can talk about just the filtering behind it and, you know, does our filter apply to your device and what are some other things? I mean, heck,
It
if
just
someone's
creates
on an
more
Apple
work.
device, they can
It
text,
does.
right?
I'm
And
just
there's other
saying,
things. And
we
so
need to have
there's-
those answers for the parents
There
who are
is.
difficult.
So
That's
right
all.
now, we don't allow bring your own technology, and in terms of if you don't take a device, you know, there are things that our teachers work through in terms of alternative assignments. If you, it doesn't make
Yeah, because
it more
what if-
difficult,
If I'm
but-
not gonna sign, I was wondering,
Yeah.
like, there's gonna be someone that's like, I'm not signing that. So then do you still
Sure.
give the child the laptop?
No.
Or does the teacher then have to do extra to, okay, so the
I'll
teacher
tell
would
Those
have
are
to.
things that we
There's
need.
lots of stuff I didn't sign and nobody ever asked me about, because nobody ever looks at it.
I didn't sign a lot of stuff too, but then again, my kids don't take SOLs. So I'm just not a normal person. And there's always gotta be a response for the abnormal people.
I'm just saying,
That's all.
for a principal to have staff responsible for looking at the 2,000 signed various forms, the 5 different forms, 2,000, having somebody check them, doesn't happen. So,
But
How
parents
did
are
they get
supposed to
these
sign the
pizza
code of
parties
conduct,
then?
why can't we just make it
Well,
part of the
now
code of
most
conduct?
of it is done
They will
on
probably put it
Check
in
that
parent
one.
view, and at that
They
point,
don't
they
allow
can
you
run
to
exception
access
reports,
their
because that's how they do
view.
it for like family life
I did
We
not.
would encourage
right?
the,
Like,
the military.
we have a
work.
method to do it that makes it very low tech on staff.
So we do agree that now's a great time for us to implement some of the stuff with middle schools. I know Ms. Johnson can work with
And-
principals. I've had
And the ninth
several
graders, as Dr.
Yep.
Warner said.
come back
coming
too,
in.
in terms of looking at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's try to.
And we've
let's
started
try
to put
aim
some
for
structures in
something
place.
For
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
summer, if in fact we're gonna hand out brand new computers to every middle school, I would like to have something, acknowledgement by the parents
Yeah.
that accepts it, that this is a new, Chromebook we're gonna expect.
I
can we-
still would prefer the tiered method versus straight every 6th grader take it home. I still prefer the tiered method.
It's a lot to matriculate into a middle school.
Yeah.
I prefer to just let them stay, they all need to stay, until we can
I
find out a
don't
better
disagree,
way to
but
protect.
I wouldn't have a problem with
My
our gear
compromise
because
would
you
be
are
the-
prepping
What
them
is
for high
our
school.
next step as a board? Like, do we need to
Approve
create a
the money.
policy to direct you to make, like, what's that next step?
So,
Well, the first step is to get the
Because
money
respect the tech
allocated
is
to
the
us so
right.
we can buy them.
so we are waiting to purchase these. We do need them for next year, and so that's, we're getting late, so we would purchase them tomorrow, probably. I think we're ready to push go, right, Hunter?
Pretty much.
And so that, and then I think, for me, it's working with our chief technology officer that comes in to really look at where we are, working with our middle school and high school principals. You know, we've mentioned a lot of things that are in the works that we are working on now, we're collecting them all. So really, for us to really firm that up, I think that there are pieces within our code of conduct that we have already, but we can review that to make sure that that still gives us the backing that we need, there to support. I like the idea of acknowledgement, I don't wanna call contract, acknowledgement around that I have this, and for us to make sure, like Dr. Stemple said, to make sure with the fees, that we are applying those consistently and saying, hey, you know, you messed this up, we're gonna apply this fee, and we're gonna do this fine. So, I think all of that are things that are in the work that we are working on, and we're happy to come back and give you an update
Yes.
as we.
Yeah, I
I
think
have a
this is
question.
something that the board, like,
Yeah.
we
If you-
really need to pay close attention to because it has a price tag.
Yep.
Right, like if this was whatever, some of the other things, I think it could very clearly go, right, be like, okay, just let us know how it's going. But if this requires the board to actually put down words on paper in a policy, because again, it has a price tag, so whatever validates it makes it.
So I wonder if we come back at the beginning of the school year, like, let's get the school year underway, and then we can give you an update on how this.
So what if we're gonna make
Y'all
them
not
sign
seeing Miss Guy's hand up, gosh darn it, y'all make me
computers
say a
at the beginning
word.
of the school year?
My hand is up, ladies, come on now. What I would like to see is, and whenever y'all are ready, because we don't understand how it's integrated into the classroom, maybe some teachers aren't sure how they're supposed to do it, but obviously parents don't understand either. I would like a presentation at one of the meetings that explains all that so that the public has that information, the parents have an understanding of what's going on in the classrooms, and there's a level of expectation that is either gonna be met or not met. But then that's
Including
how we
screen
can.
time.
Would love to do that.
Exactly, so all that information should be wrapped up in a pretty bow that the public can understand as well. That's what I would like.
Ms. Healy, what do you say?
Yeah, I don't, actually, I was saying if we get this report at the beginning of the school year, it's gonna be too late.
I think we
to
need to
deal
at least
with
start
it-
with the
with the
ninth graders, when they get their
signing
new
something.
computer, there needs to be some
Well-
respect the tech plan in place for those students.
But also the middle school, if we're gonna spend $2 million,
But
Yeah,
before
I
they
think
get
it's
their
gotta
new
go to middle
computers.
I want something,
I think it's gotta go to middle school.
at least that the parents acknowledge that they're getting a brand new, Chromebook, and that the parents are responsible for it. Now, and also I'd like to follow up on Alyssa's statement about the privilege versus the right, because if in fact that's the way we're gonna look at it, which I don't have a problem with, if they abuse the privilege, then we have the right to take it back, and that can be in that acknowledgement as well. And then that follows up with, with Maya's point about, what's happening in the classroom, and, how are the
Instructional
teachers on
plan.
board with this? It sounds like something that, as we move along, not for the beginning of the year, but that some of your advisory committees, the teacher advisory committee, the parent advisory committee, the PTOs, whatever, that they may be able to help us with this. So it's more of a long-term, working this out, but short-term, I think we have to have something before we hand out close to $3 million worth of new
I agree.
computers.
I agree.
Dr.
And
Chase?
thank you for your work, because what it shows is that, we've kind of muddled along since we started this out, but we have never really had a review. I've never seen anything until now, so it's a good start,
We've never
but
organized it,
it's a
we've
lot of
just
money.
done it.
There's been a lot of work
It's a
going into it,
$3
we've
million
identified some things that we can.
Well,
No,
no
no
review
Dr.
that
Chase.
we haven't gotten an update on it.
So, I just wanna publicly state that I'm really not comfortable with designated devices for second through fifth grade. I'm just not really comfortable with a lot of screen time in elementary school in general. And, research on reading and concentration and all of that, like, we are creating a whole bunch of little ADD people here who are clicking on links and going down rabbit holes and losing that ability to concentrate. So I'm just gonna say, not a fan, so.
I think it was, I think that
That is okay.
intent was that within the cart, you have number 2, you have number 3, you have number 4.
Matches your cubby number, right?
Yeah,
Your
kind of,
book bin
yes.
number, so that when it's time for you to pull
You would always
yours-
have number 2, that's what designated.
I still would
Yeah.
like to
Well,
know.
I
am
think she's talking about the
concerned.
amount
Similar
of
to what
reliance
she
on it
was-
as an instructional
Right.
tool.
Well, that
Yeah,
would be
those
similar to
grades,
what
I
Liza
agree
was saying
100%.
about
100%.
understanding what the teacher
Right,
role is
but
in
the
using.
designated device was
Yeah, I mean,
basically,
if
you
we're,
always have 2,
if
that's
we're,
what was meant by that.
we say helping with, screen time in elementary school, but I think it's our due diligence to go middle school on up. Because, I mean,
yeah.
what we are requiring is part of an issue. I know it's how we instructionally reach and teach, but at the same time, I still think that we need to be
She's cutting
doing our due
school.
diligence.
She's not on a
I also
Chromebook.
think
Oh, sure.
that there is a difference, so when we're teaching children to read, there is a difference between holding a book and reading a book and looking at a screen. And I'm just concerned if we are too reliant on the screen time, that we're impeding their ability to become good readers, so
So I had,
Agreed.
two things. One, when we talk about respect the tech, I understand from your concern as a budget standpoint, but also from a responsibility standpoint. Akin kind of like to when your kid is getting a driver's license, right? Like you are telling them operating this improperly or without the proper care is going to create lasting damage either to property or people, right? And it's the same thing when we let kids online. And, I have a 6th grader this year and an 8th grader this year, and one was real excited to get a Chromebook because didn't have one in elementary school, and one is very much like, I'm so done with this thing. But to get from that mindset, it does take a lot of effort from the adults in that kid's lives. And so I would hope that respect the tech, and I love the idea of this software that you said that parents I think it's important not just to see what your kids are using, but like the balance. Like
Yep.
if your kids are on a computer 100% of the time, how much of this is actually doing academic stuff and how much of it is looking at, or Googling, how do lightsabers work, right? Like, are we using the tool for its intended purpose? Even if it's not nefarious, if you are being distracted down rabbit holes of cool stuff to look up when you're supposed to be in math, that's also something that we as parents need to kind of almost be trained to look for in addition to, the actual instructional time. And when you're talking about Sandra being on top of creating something cool and awesome to roll out, I'm really hoping that means it's going to be incorporated into our transition day, which I think is the most logical place to talk to 6th graders and 9th graders.
Yeah.
So this middle
Both.
school number is for every middle schooler to get new technologies?
Yes.
Oy.
Yeah.
So that
Well, but
means
the-
4
but
grades
the
in a row
oldest-
getting new technology, correct?
So there is two different issues here though, right? Because it's the physical Chromebook itself and having to replace them, but then it's also the actual educational impact of
Yes.
utilizing the Chromebook. And as a personal frustration of mine, we keep telling me, and by we, it's not necessarily all you in this room, but anybody in this room, that kids need this or they're not gonna be successful later on in life. And I just don't think in second grade, that's a fair argument to make. So I really would request that we are also really looking at the necessity. Like, if we're gonna be doing data on so many different things, then we really need to really focus on what is the importance of a second grader doing math on a Chromebook versus doing math by hand. Now, I get it for science and everything else and fun experiments and those kinds of things. But for me, at that age group, there's no reason why the teacher can't show the YouTube video from her platform and utilize technology in that way and have the kids actually being up here and not down here in their Chromebook, so.
I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, but I also know, like, my mother worked in Arlington for 30 years. They had iPads like 20, 30 years, like, from the time they came out. They also had that thing that we're gonna institute this year. They had something like that too that helps parents track. They also had training. They also have a lot of other stuff that we just didn't have, and so when we did just give it to
In
people.
Arlington, it's money.
Yeah, well, yes, so what I'm saying is, when we gave
Well,
it
there's
to people
that.
in
Yeah, there's
our
that.
car, we didn't
That's
do
what we
any
don't
of
have.
those training, we didn't have any of that stuff, and no one was ready for it.
Yeah.
We were already, and we still are, 20 to 25 years behind many other counties in the state of Virginia. And those students are performing at a higher rate than we are for many other reasons, but some of it is because they have integrated how to use their electronics in I would say a healthier way than what we are. And so we're starting now, after letting it out, like letting the cat out the bag, now we're backing up and starting what we should have done before we even should have done it.
Because
And
we
that's
did it in a reactive way during COVID.
Yeah.
because
We
we
have
were
never
25
caught
years
up.
behind.
Yeah.
We should
So,
have
and I
been
would,
doing this stuff.
and I would also say, and you know, in terms of from teachers being able to meet a wide variety of needs, it can be a good resource. And so if have a small group that I'm working with on certain reading skills without technology, and I have another one that might be working on a technology program that's computer adaptive, that rises to their level, and so it is where, as a teacher, I can't be with them at that particular time. So I think there are some appropriate times and places for that. But I think the instructional piece, the point is well taken. We would love to come back and talk to you about instructional technology, the needs, the screen time, the role of the teacher, all of that. I think that would be,
Hopefully the benefit is that you find out better ways to help the teachers utilize the
Yes.
technology instead of it
Yes.
just being.
And again, I
shot
don't think we've
in
done that training as much. It has
Right.
been like, it was COVID, here you go, and now, so.
And the role of the parent, because
Yeah.
a lot of people, like, we
Yeah.
don't know what to do with these things. I know,
Yeah.
we don't want them, we don't want our kids coming home with them, we don't want them addicted to it, but they all are. So, I know it's not our job necessarily to educate parents, but we definitely can put some links and some resources and give them some more information when we have that type of conversation, because it's not good what we're seeing with, and I'm talking about middle schoolers on down, those kids are not built the same as the older kids. And they are not functioning at the same level, and some of that is because we just threw screens in front of them and walked away.
So a lot of work is taking place. We're looking forward to moving this forward. As Ms. Healy said, we haven't taken this kind of deep dive before, and
Yeah.
we've identified some areas that we need to continue to work on, and we need to
Thank you, Jim.
improve, and we'll do that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Hunter.
Thank you.
All of our COVID elementary
Thank your
school
staff.
classes will be in
Say.
middle school or
You
higher
wanna-
next year.
Yeah. And
This shouldn't take so much, right? This is just the last. Title one.
That's what I'm talking about.
We doing Title I now, or you ready to roll right in?
Yeah, I think Missy's picking up lunch, but I don't think she's back yet. You wanna go do a
from the-
takeaway check?
Yes,
I
yes.
just had Michael already, he said she's not back
It's
yet.
not,
Okay.
we gotta establish this.
Right.
All right, so, are you
We're
ready
gonna
for me
roll
to-
right in, and when Missy says lunch is set up, we'll take a brief break, and then we'll reconvene.
I'm sorry, are we doing it right now?
Yeah, we're
Oh,
gonna do
wait,
it
now.
No, wait.
No!
Oh, I thought you said we're doing it, okay,
Not
well,
a
you know
break
what?
right now.
Y'all go ahead with that. I'm sorry, I was
Title I
confused.
schools
I apologize.
recommendations.
Title one. Let's keep moving.
All right, so we do have Mr. Bowling here with us as we talk about Title I. Every year, you know, you approve the annual grant for Title I, and so we want to dig into this a little bit deeper this year and just talk a little bit about the percentages. I know we've had conversations around, all right, how do the decisions we make this year impact next year, and then when we open 3 new schools in 2026? So we want to have a part of that conversation. There's also, I know we've had conversations around middle schools and the impact of middle schools, and so I want to talk about that with you today before you get ready to take any action on the Title I annual grant. Mr. Bowling?
Okay, Chris is pulling up the presentation. So, good, I guess it's afternoon now, so, good afternoon. We've previously spoken with you about the Title I school identification. We've talked about different scenarios and informed you about different perspectives as you go into redistricting and how there may be impacts. What we were waiting on is our March 30th numbers to come in through the nutrition services, and the nutrition services determines those numbers that we use, the free and reduced lunch percentages, and we identify schools based on that. So we had to get that first. But, so just a couple reminders as we go in that each school division is allocated an amount of money for Title I school support. Should we decide to change the schools based on the threshold we set, we may have to divide the pie smaller or give each person a larger share, depending on if we identify more schools or fewer schools. Okay, so historically, we have only identified elementary schools for Title I funding. And we do have the ability to say, we're just funding elementary, or we could add in, thank you, here's the presentation coming.
Ms. Haley?
Ms. Healy.
Thank you.
And for at least 5 years that I can track back, the threshold for support has remained at 40%. And just as a reminder, it does not have to be in 5% increments. However, many people do make these thresholds in 5% increments. The next slide, Chris, talks a little bit about our economically disadvantaged student population, which Title I serves. And you can see here that over the past 4 years, we've had a steady increase in the number of students who are identified as economically disadvantaged. And I do anticipate that, with federal layoffs, we will see some increase in those numbers as well.
When is that data collected though? That's not till.
April again?
Yeah,
So
it's like
this
a year
was-
from now,
This
right?
is current as of just a
Now.
few days ago.
Okay, so
Yes.
everything we do now could change.
Oh, sorry, this was from the fall membership table, so that is probably from September
September,
30th
okay.
numbers? Sorry, I apologize.
So these numbers, our student count has gone up by approximately 1,500 students, but our economically disadvantaged went up by over 5,000. Am I reading that correctly?
You are,
That's amazing.
yes. Significant impacts of the pandemic.
So that's not just the new students, that's.
Nope. So, just to remind you of what these what this funding can support. Number one, it has to be all supplemental support. So it cannot supplant, meaning take the place of anything we plan to provide for a school already. So for instance, if a school gets a reading specialist, we can't just say, we'll pay for that reading specialist out of Title I money. We would have to provide additional resources on top of what the school division provides with local funding. But what types of staff they hire and what their jobs are really can change based on the needs of the school. So up here you'll see a list of different kinds of expenditures that could be included through Title I funding.
This is almost like that school-based allowance that we've always said we wanted to do but can't. So in effect, if we identify Title I school, we're giving them extra money to use as they see needed.
For their community,
To
right.
enhance what they
But
already have.
unfortunately, we only get one lump sum of money and we can't divide it out
Right,
among all
but,
of our
but it's,
It's still doing something for
It's-
that
yes,
community.
yeah.
it's
Yes.
special. you know.
And it's
But
on
you just-
top,
we can't-
and it's
oh,
on
we
top
can't
of
just-
whatever
already doing.
we already provide for all schools,
And this is on top of the class size reduction too, correct?
in addition to.
That's why I asked for
Yes.
those numbers to see, because they're already getting class size reduction money.
Okay.
And now this is, extra.
Additional.
Okay, so, I mean, you can see that it's really wide in the scope of things that it can provide. And our staff works with each school individually to identify how much is that gonna cost and to help them with their budgeting, and their expenditures as well. And Chris's team does too, so we have a really nice partnership. The considerations that we, the things that we considered when coming to you with a recommendation are, we looked at potential redistricting scenarios, of course. We looked at our growing population of economically disadvantaged students. We looked at the financial implications of identifying additional schools, meaning if you have to slice the pie thinner, how much does it really hurt? Because at some point, if you slice too thin, you reduce the efficacy of the money, right? So we looked very closely at that. We looked at funding balances and at anticipated carryover, meaning if a school had been had a certain amount of money this year that was identified through Title I funding, what we're looking at is how much can they carry over to the next year to offset any losses that they might get. And so those were all in the consideration. Federal accountability, we thought about that as the new accountability changes come through and what the impacts would be there. We looked at qualifying middle school achievement data, so we were considering, you're gonna see this recommendation includes providing support to 2 middle schools. And so we looked at their achievement data, that is linked in the presentation, and you've seen that data previously. So we looked at the current budget forecast, and also at additional school needs, in particular those of Drew and Heim. So,
I'm gonna hold on, but go ahead.
okay. So our recommendation on slide 7, we explored a couple of different options. Go ahead, one more slide, Chris. So we looked at different kinds of thresholds. So we looked at 40%, which we had done in the past. We looked at 45%, and we looked at 50%. Then we looked at identification of elementary schools only, as we've done in the past, or at the possibility of identifying middle schools. And this is not a new process, just so you know. We're bringing it to you more formally for the first time in many years. Usually it comes through on consent. And because of a change, but also all the redistricting discussions that have occurred. All right, so Chris, next slide. So on the next slide, you will see, and before we jump too deeply in, the percentage free and reduced lunch, which is in the 4th column from the left, it's indicated as FRL. That percentage is a rounded number that you'll see there. So the actual computations are based on the hundredths place, but we don't have those listed in here. So there may be some rounding. If you do straight numbers off of this, the calculations, then you might see a little bit of a difference. So what this indicates is these are the free and reduced lunch numbers as indicated by our nutrition services. That's the FRL column. The next column is for schools that are identified as CEP, meaning every student in the school receives free and reduced lunch automatically. There is a multiplier that is used, and that is a 1.6 multiplier. And what that does is compensates for the students who are not required to fill out the application because it's already identified as a CEP school, meaning they don't have to fill out the paperwork anymore. But we know that there are additional students in that school.
that 1.6 multiplier is set by the Secretary of Agriculture at the USDA level.
So, can I just, for clarity,
Mhm.
so for example, Anthony Burns is listed at 39%. But because it's CEP school, you know that more than 39% of the students would qualify for free and reduced
Yes.
lunch, but many of them don't fill out the paperwork.
We
That
don't
is-
know anything,
Right,
right?
right,
Well,
We assume.
right.
we are required to use the multiplier and use the percentage of CEP with the CEP multiplier that you see in column 5, as we are setting our threshold. So you have to use column 5 and you move down and you set your threshold. And then for Shirley Heim, you see we switch over to 56%, and that would be the number we use for Shirley Heim.
So the CEP, could you refresh my memory
Sure.
on how they are identified? I thought we identified them.
So,
And for the public, can you say,
Oh,
on
yeah.
the record, what CEP stands
Yes.
for?
yes, so it's, so we'll start with where the money, so Title I funding is federal funding. It is passed through the state to individual school divisions. The state sets the total amount that we receive based on our economically disadvantaged population. So we'll start there. The multiplier is set by the U.S. Department of Agriculture,
That was my question.
and I'm getting there.
Four, okay.
And there is a range from 1.3 to 1.6 that they can set that at. It has been set for us, and it's been the same since 2014, and it's set at 1.6. And so, I'm sorry, now,
What
you're,
is CEP?
Oh,
How do you
CEP.
qualify for it?
Okay,
Yeah,
so-
what-
Who,
yeah,
yeah,
community
what is the
that's
criteria?
the, it's called a community eligibility provision.
Right.
And Chris, do you wanna, is Brian in here? Okay.
Yeah.
Brian, do you wanna speak to how the CEP number, identification is, how schools are identified as CEP?
Sure. So, every year on April the 1st, we have to validate the numbers. So CEP, the Community Eligibility Provision, is based off the number or the percentage of students in a school that are approved for meal benefits based upon, we call direct certification. That means they're approved from SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, free, those, foster, homeless. So based upon that number alone, if that percentage is at a certain number and we deem that it's worthwhile for the district to do so, that it makes sense in the school, then we'll determine whether a school is CEP.
So is that the percentage of free and reduced lunch, FRL on here? Is that different from what you're talking about?
Yes, it is, because the percentage of free and reduced lunch in a non-CEP school includes students and families who apply by income application. Whereas CEP schools, families, we are not required to apply. In fact, we cannot accept that.
No, I get that. I keep going back to, I'm trying to, in my mind, see the difference between a school that we automatically multiply by 1.6, and I get it, we have to do that, and I understand it's because families like, I don't have to fill out that form, they're gonna get a free lunch anyway. But the other schools that have free and reduced lunch, is there a factor, and that's based on the income, is there a factor that we would consider to determine whether they should be a CEP school that is different? You mentioned some other things here.
Yeah.
How do we get that information? Because I'm looking at these, for example, Conway has 48%.
That's on your
Free-
other handout that
free and reduced
Chris
lunch.
provided you with earlier.
Right. They have 48%, yet they're not a CEP school, whereas Burns is 39% free and reduced lunch, but they are a CEP
Yeah.
school.
But you're talking about the
So-
likelihood they would fill out the application for the FRL, so we would make the determination.
I'm just saying, how do we
Those two numbers are, they're
determine?
two different numbers. They're measuring two different things.
Okay.
So, the percentage of free and reduced at Conway measures, students who are approved through, social service benefits, SNAP, TANF, as in addition to income applications. The percentage, at Anthony Burns is only the students who are directly certified that are receiving social service benefits in that school. That's why you can't compare the two numbers. That's where the multiplier would come in.
So why would we not want our schools with the higher percentages of free and reduced lunch to be CEP schools?
CEP is based not on the percent of free and reduced, but the percent of families who are receiving social service benefits.
Which we don't have that knowledge until or do we have that knowledge?
We have that.
It's
It's
more based
divided.
on community demographics,
Exactly.
not
Yeah,
on school
community.
demographics.
But we have
It's not
to have-
necessarily who shows up in our schools every day.
If we're saying that they wouldn't apply, I mean, if we're using the 1.6
But we only say they
multiplier,
won't
must have
apply
something.
after they've already been identified as receiving SNAP or being
I know,
dependent.
Because we have free, and I mean, we have families that qualify as low income in probably every neighborhood in Stafford County. But some neighborhoods and some areas are going to have higher propensity of that because of their, space to cost ratios. Like you can get a house of a certain size to accommodate a family of a certain size that's on an income of a certain size. Some of that, some of it is not all based on income either. We have enlisted military people who are on an enlisted salary, which is not super high, right? But they might have a lot of dependents and they can afford to live in neighborhoods because they're getting base housing allowance, but they're, at the end of the day, their salary still doesn't provide enough to cover the needs of the family. Just because the government is paying, through their military service for them to
still
live
get
in a
social
house
services.
that can accommodate the size of their family.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways that families come in and can qualify, and that's part of the community eligibility provision. Is it looks like the entire community that feeds into that school, and it's meant to support the community, versus like a free and reduced lunch application that is meant to be an application for a specific family based on that one household or one roof needs under that roof versus the community demographics as a whole.
So how often do we review these CEP schools?
Every April 1st.
So every year, and then does that come to us after April 1st to determine whether we're gonna continue, whether we're gonna, add anybody on? I assume we never take them off unless we have to. I don't know, but that would be, if it's a free lunch for everybody, then that helps our student meal day.
Typically, the program is set up typically where, once a school reaches that CEP status, it tends to stay on. There are circumstances which may require,
Like
changes
redistricting?
in that, like redistricting. Anything that would grossly impact the attendance area for that school. Those are things that.
As an example, it is likely that Anthony Burns will drop to an estimated 23% free and reduced lunch rate, which we would probably remove them from CEP but we will be removing them from Title I status, it appears.
Okay. Can you explain the red numbers, the reduction? Is that
Okay.
because you've taken those numbers to put towards the middle school?
So, look, yeah, absolutely. So,
Hi, changes. Yeah.
to get to here, what you see in front of you is with a threshold set at 50%. Now, I know that the first thing you'll say is, well, Conway and Ferry Farm are on there. Well, it's because last year they were identified, and so they were a Title I school. We need to provide transition funding to them for 1 year after.
Okay.
So the line really is just below Shirley Heim, but this is an indicator of not only the threshold, but also the funding that we'll be providing to schools. So this shows you in column 6 then is the 24-25 funding level for each school. You'll notice that Drew Middle and Shirley Heim are indicated as a 0. That's because they were not identified last year. And we're proposing with this threshold that new funding levels, and it does divide the pie. It slices a little bit thinner.
Have we talked about this before? Because I feel like I thought Drew was getting some benefit either from Title I or from CEP.
It is a
They were getting
CEP school already.
Okay.
And the one thing that, the one interesting fact there is once there's a school is identified as CEP, and if it's not identified as Title I, and with the CEP multiplier, if it reaches 75%, or over 75%, so that means 75.1 or greater, then it's automatically identified as a CEP school. So Drew is already,
As a title.
I'm sorry, as a Title I school. So Drew is already inching closer and closer
So
to there
then,
as well.
can I kind of back up a minute and wonder,
Why not?
Where has Shirley Heim been? Like, did they just have a big jump, or did we, like, why was Shirley Heim not?
Because they're not CEP.
Identified as a CEP school
They're not CEP.
prior?
Right.
They are.
Because they're free and reduced, like, even because they're free and
Currently
reduced
not.
lunch
No,
is
they're not
not
CEP.
higher,
Oh, no, not
or
CEP.
is higher than really any other school.
Yeah,
It was
it's the highest
never
one as well.
even
Yeah.
brought to the table with, hey, Shirley Heim is up here, but here's why they don't qualify, or
Yep.
here's what we can do for them because they don't qualify, because it's evident that the needs are there for this community, but I don't recall, and maybe I'm just have a mental block, but like, that we haven't really had a conversation about that.
I'm gonna jump in really quick
Sure.
for Brian. Him and I had a lot of conversations about this, but Brian, you can jump in as well. So, the threshold to qualify as CP is pretty low. But when you qualify for CEP, you're taking a reduced amount for every meal that you serve for federal reimbursement. So we evaluate on April 1st, and that number's 25%. So you just have to be 25% free and reduced based on the community eligibility provision, which I know, not to confuse it, but as you know, that's different than application-based. And so a lot of our schools would qualify, but we have to then do an analysis, and we did that already with Shirley Heim this year. And if we converted Shirley Heim to a CEP school, we would lose money each month
That I remember hearing,
because
but
we
not
have a
necessarily
high
about
participation of free and reduced students already that are taking lunch. And so for all of those students, we get the full federal reimbursement rate for those students. But as soon as you go to CEP school, you take a
There's
reduced
a higher
amount.
propensity of rule followers at Shirley Heim, like that will fill out the paperwork
Yes.
and qualify, whereas the other places where.
So those free and reduced students are submitting an application and they're still getting that free meal, but we would actually take a fraction of that and then applying it to all students, and that would ultimately mean
How
that
much
we
is the
would.
reduction?
I think it depends, but what's the reduction amount, Brian? Is it vary?
varies,
For middle school?
it varies depending upon what the school's identified student percentage is. So.
Roughly 70% though,
Yeah, so
ballpark?
maybe say 70%, 75%.
A reduction
So
of
that
70?
means-
No,
So
sorry.
we're getting 25%?
So-
No, I'm
that
sorry.
means where-
You get 75%.
So whenever you
This is reduction, 25.
Yeah, so every 100 students that eat at a CEP school, I'm just using this as an example, every 100, then if the claiming percentage is 75%, then we only get the full reimbursement on 75 of those
Be
students.
curious to look at our debt, student debt ratio and see what
So-
percentage that is.
And we take that into
It might
account.
be higher than 25%.
It's one of the things I've been working with Mr.
So,
Williams on the last 2 years is when we're
to now.
doing that analysis of CEP schools, we take that into account, because if we're not collecting it, then it's not really income to us. What we don't wanna do is convert a school to CEP, and then we have to increase lunch prices at all the other schools to cover the shortfalls at that school.
And why isn't a high school like North Stafford a CEP school?
Probably the same analysis that I explained for Shirley
Yeah.
High.
Rule followers, people.
So they're paying
We're getting
in
full price.
Even though the federal government, the USDA reduced the minimum threshold for being eligible for CEP at 25%, they didn't increase additional funding. So the lower that for example, if a school was 25% and you made them CEP, that 25% times 1.6, what is that? Chris is a math man.
Let me do it that quickly.
Chris
But-
also
but-
exhibited some English skills today, I just want you to know that.
So,
Saying, use the
so
word
it's a
verb
smaller,
in a sentence.
yeah, so we're just getting a paid, reimbursed on a very small percentage of the number of students in that building. So it would be worthwhile. Then any loss would then have to come out of the district's operating fund. So therefore, we want to be very careful that we're not taking on any, thing that would cost the district money.
Okay.
So this slide number 8 is basically telling us that there are 2 schools that need it, and we need to split the pie a little bit thinner so that we can give it to these 2 schools, period.
Yes.
That's what this is all about.
That
But
is
that's
my
based on
analysis.
current numbers,
Okay,
not
yeah.
the redistricting numbers.
Well, look at Stafford Middle,
So then what does
49.
redistricting do to
Yeah.
this?
It's
How
close.
can
So
they
we're
take
taking
on-
Anthony Burns off CEP? Is that star for that or the star for Title I?
Sorry,
The star for Anthony Burns, is it gonna stay on as
That's-
CEP?
that's transition year funding. That
Okay.
means that it
Oh, coming off
won't
of
be
Title I.
on the funding
For
list
Title I.
next year.
Okay, but are they staying CEP as well?
That is not determined by our office,
Yeah,
so
it had to be-
For right
it has to
now.
be reevaluated next year.
Next year?
for 2026.
April. With
August
the
of
23%
2026 school year, it'll be
free
reevaluated.
Okay, so
reduced
these are going, these are
percentage
set
for
for the
next year?
I'm
CEP
hard pressed
schools.
to find it to be a
No
CEP.
changes
Right.
next year to CEP.
So it'll be reevaluated in April first,
Okay,
next year.
okay, gotcha, thank
So
you.
yeah, we are recommending the 50% threshold, so and that's what you would have in front of you in terms of how the pie would be further split. It would allow us to bring on 2 middle schools who really need some additional support, but it does decrease some support from the other schools.
Mhm.
We have had conversations with all of those principals and about what that would mean and how that would look, and to make sure we're still providing the right amount of support.
So how does this help us, oh, maybe it's coming, sorry, for, 18 and 19? Cause we all know that that's a
So
concern when
if
they
you
open.
go down to slide 10, Chris, well, I had some, can I run through this
Yes,
rationale real quick?
yes,
Yeah.
Just to make sure you know our thinking.
Okay.
No, that's for CEP. I'll talk about that. Title I is our discretion. I understand CEP and I understand your math, and thank you for looking out for us and not having us lose money. But Stafford Middle being at 49% free and reduced, that is so close to the 50, and especially given
So
the
is
fact
North.
that Drew is at 41. And I don't know if the 1.5 is accurate, but that's the fact we have to deal with. But if we're approving a 41%
Over a 49.
over 49, and we
Isn't it
can't not pick it
It's
because we have to
relative
go down
school size
the
though,
line.
too, right?
I think
Yeah,
Stafford Middle
but
is
how
so
many
close,
students are
we
in
ought to
there?
consider
But
Yeah.
Title
splitting
I
that
funding
pie
is
up.
different than the free and reduced lunch funding. And because Title I is a restricted grant, we only get one lump sum, we have to make sure that the other needs are there before we,
Right, but
we
the
have to
whole,
set our
but the whole
threshold.
criteria we're saying for Title I is the percentage of free and reduced lunch.
Yes.
Well, that's.
Adding on this
If
this
you read your
So-
rationale, it'll
imposed
help us
percentage
understand.
of
Wait, hold
1.6.
on, time out, cause he's got a rationale. So maybe that helps us figure out why Drew and Shirley were, or not, and I'm
The
right.
rationale is it's 50%.
Well,
cutoff,
but
right?
also this is,
But
if,
And you,
I-
and you
Those are
said
two
we didn't,
different
we
things,
didn't
right?
consider,
I told you the
consider
things
the
that we
percentage in the
considered.
couch. But I
Yeah,
can
the
tell you
rationale.
that maybe back in the old days, we actually looked at these schools and we looked at the needs and and if it was, you know, we might have said, well, we like 40, but if one was at 39 or 38, we would consider that. It wasn't not this arbitrary cutoff of that. So I'm saying that I would consider adding in Shirley Heim at 49%.
Stafford Middle.
I'm sorry, Stafford Middle,
but
because,
then how much are you taking away from Shirley and Drew?
well, you're dividing it by 3, the middle
If you're,
school
if you're,
portion.
if
No,
you're
no.
49,
No.
you gotta put it.
It's based on the population of students.
No,
I
that's
know-
what
I
I'm
know
talking
Mr.
about, adding Stafford Middle.
So I know Mr.
Versus-
Bowling has some rationale to share. I will share that, you know, it is a balancing act, right? There's only so much money to go around, and we do look at kind of where do we recommend the right threshold to be? And it is a balance. We've talked with all of these principals around what that means. There's additional federal accountability measures, there's other things that they have to do, and so it's not just, I don't wanna say just free money, right? There's other requirements that they have to engage with, and so we have talked with, like I said, Shirley Heim and Drew about this, because we felt like that's the right balance so that you don't further dilute the money so much that it doesn't have as much of an impact. And so that's been our approach, and I know Mr. Bowling has some other rationale to share about how we got here.
Do the middle schools have a higher
And-
threshold of accountability than the elementary schools, or different?
In this recommendation, we've set it as the same. We do
No,
have
and
the-
then,
oh, sorry.
so how they use the money, so is
Oh.
it different for the middle school, is
No,
it,
The rules are the same.
the rules is?
I mean, they can provide the same types
And
of
we also
services.
cut off Conway here. I mean, Conway is at 48, and by adding the middle schools, we're definitely cutting
Well,
out
but this is-
Conway. And we
this
did,
is-
as Dr. Chase would say, we made a commitment for the population when we moved them to Conway, that we would give additional resources.
And they
part of
will
the
get it for
additional
1 year.
resources was the Title I funding. So I'm not opposed to adding the middle schools, but there is a cost.
Sure.
And the cost is Conway is paying the cost of adding the middle schools. And if we're adding the middle schools, I
This is very
feel
fine.
that Stafford Middle is so close to that line that you drew, you know, if the tide came in, that line could move 1%, that's all. It's, yes, it is a limited amount of money, and is it enough to make a difference? Anything's gonna help. but I still come back to this 41% before
Well,
the 1.6.
You have a rationale, and then I have a question maybe based after you, I mean, if you were waiting to tell us something.
And I wanted to throw one other thing in, which, you know, in terms of thinking about middle school or not thinking about middle school is, at least there has been, loan forgiveness for people who work in Title I schools. So, you know, one of the things I have heard often from Dr. Warner is concern about staffing Shirley Heim. If Shirley Heim is Title I, then it may be more attractive to some teachers because they get loan forgiveness.
And that's if they work there for 5 years, it's up to $15,000.
Yeah, but for how long?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know
Those are the
whether
current
that's.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with adding them in, but I'm saying if you're gonna add them in, you know, that 1% for
Yep.
Stafford Middle, if that
But
were
if
my
you do
district,
Stafford
I
Middle,
would
then
be
you have to do
jumping
North
on this
Stafford
table.
High School,
I
and he
don't
already
disagree.
said if you slice it
No,
too
No, you
thin.
don't.
because,
Because you're doing it
because
for
we're
middle
talking
and you're
about
not
middle,
doing it
we're
for
not
high
talking about high schools at all.
So you're just saying, just add it
But
to
I
Stafford.
think
Well,
it's-
we're
It's
deciding
more
that we
than
wanna
just
make a change
the free
from
and
our
reduced lunch.
practice
Did you
of
have
just
something
having
to move us
elementary.
forward?
Can I
Yes,
finish?
I think
Okay.
so.
We're,
I thought you were
the
just talking to Maya.
discussion, the
Can you
discussion
change to the
is,
rationale,
Yes.
Chris?
is not the discussion, do we expand the Title I schools from elementary to middle? That is the discussion.
Well,
And if
To
so,
these two
how are they
middle, but
split
to the
up?
point
But
of
we need to
next
hear
year
the
and
rationale
transitioning
before
and
we talk
redistricting
about
next year,
what
that might
and
be the
how.
same lump sum,
Not
but
middles.
we might be able to pull some with the redistricting profile
But
this
there's
year.
no change in middle schools next
Let's
year.
hear the rationale and then
No.
discuss
But-
based
but in
on
elementary
what the
there is, so
rationale
that
is,
money
rather
could go
than
to
what we
Stafford
think the
Middle.
rationale is.
Okay, rationale.
Rationale.
So I could have put as the first bullet, unfortunately, you have to put a threshold somewhere. You have to draw a line. And that is a very tough decision, and what we looked at was the impact on schools that were already identified and trying to reduce the impact on each school and looking at the overall big picture. It is tough. It is really hard to lay a line somewhere, but once you start splitting the pie thinner and thinner, your efficacy goes down. Because you can't afford a full position maybe, or you can't, so you can only hire part-time people, and so that becomes a little difficult. So we were looking at how to maximize that funding to support the schools in greatest need. Shirley Heim has been one of those schools that has consistently expressed additional needs and staffing concerns that we have not heard as much from. I mean, we know that no school is perfect with staffing, but we've heard a greater need coming out of Shirley Heim than we have Stafford. And so, again, we have to make a tough decision at some point.
Maybe some just don't cry as loud.
We did
Then they're not
consider,
just gonna
well,
answer it.
we spoke with them as well. We did consider all the redistricting scenarios and the predicted, those projected percentages of free and reduced price lunch as well as the CEP multiplier. And then we looked to minimize that impact on the allocation of the supplemental Title I funding. So having said that, Chris, can you go to the next slide? As we look to 26, 27, so should we go with this recommendation, the number of potentially identified schools would be 9. The total new schools would be 2 in 26, 27, with ES 18 and 19 also being identified, and if we stayed with the same threshold. And then there would be 3 schools that would transition away from Title I funding over the years.
What is that CES?
Conway, Ferry Farm.
But
So
Conway
really,
isn't
the
on
free
here.
and reduced
This
lunch
is-
is just
no, are they-
one factor
Yeah.
in multiple
Oh.
factors in evaluating a school for Title I funding.
And we've tried to put potentially in there several times because, I mean, some of this is based on your
Right.
redistricting decisions. And I know this is ahead of that, but you've asked for this, we wanted to bring this back to you so you could see what that could look like. Because, as I think Mr. Bowling tried to explain is, if we remove Title I from a school, they do get a transition year. And so next year, so planning ahead would be that transition year. So when they have the students they're gonna have in 2026, we're set up. So we're thinking 2 years ahead on this and trying to plan ahead on this. Because some of your scenarios do have, for example, Anthony Burns dropping both down to 23%, right, in both green, lime, and purple. Same way
So
with,
it would not be Title I or CEP
Yeah, it would.
at that time.
26.
It would,
In
because it'd be a
26.
transition year.
But the
No, the transition
transition
year
year
is next year,
25.
cause we
So
don't
the
redistrict
budget-
until the following.
And then
We've reached-
26 would be out.
Because of the, okay, with redistricting, the way the scenarios are looking right now,
We don't have.
Anthony Burns runs down to close to 23 in two of the top runners. And we've asked for, if there is any flexibility on that transition year with such a precipitous drop in the identified population. And we were told that we can make the transition year this year based on the projected numbers and the redistricting.
Okay.
But that transition number from Anthony Burns is at 27,900 down in the transition year? Am I reading that correctly?
That is correct.
So next year they'll be
But yet
down.
Conway is minus 118,500, which percentage-wise is a much more
And
significant.
that is because of the 1.6 multiplier.
So
And
you're allowed to do what you want on that, you just,
we do have
you have to
some,
qualify the school, do you have to give it the same amount of funding?
it's all computed the same way. I'm not sure what it,
We mentioned carryover beforehand. So we can apply for a waiver and carry over as much funding as the schools have this year. So for example, Conway is gonna be pretty much in par with what they had this year because they're keeping all of their carryover.
How much carryover, can we just get a separate report on how much carryover the schools have had, say, over the past 3 years?
Have a
How much
For the
positive
past
carryover?
3 years, so.
No, I just wanna, I'm not
Okay,
asking
no,
for it
so-
now, I just wanna get that report so I can look at it.
Yeah, no,
Because
but
if
so
they're
what I
carrying it
want you-
over, tells me they may not be using it all.
so while Conway is projected on this recommendation to lose $118,500, they have $105,000 in anticipated carryover for next year, so that can offset some of that loss for the
But-
one-year transition.
Okay, I
The
just
only
wanna see, the numbers, please,
No,
just
you
for the
understand,
past
but the
3
only
years.
reason why
carryovers.
they're having a larger amount of carryover this year, usually we're only allowed 15% of the whole grant amount to be carried over. We applied for a waiver knowing that we were going to be moving into
A transition.
redistricting the next year and the transition. So we applied for a carryover waiver. So we're allowed to carry more than 15%, and we told the principals, and with losing staffing and things that they moved and stuff like that, we told them to please stop spending until we had an
Okay,
answer.
then when I see it for the past
I
3
will-
years, this year will be different from the other
Yes.
years, that's good.
Yeah.
That's why I asked for 3 and not just
Pause,
this
and
year.
then we can revisit this, but Chick-fil-A is here, so please make a plate, Chris.
Yeah.
When I look at Shirley Heim as opposed to receiving some benefit, those population, where we're talking Widewater, Moncure, would feed into Shirley Heim. Now Burns does go to Stafford Middle, but the other schools that feed into Stafford Middle aren't, I guess, as many on this list, or the balance of like percentages of feeder schools. Like, do we factor in kids that are essentially used to receiving a benefit going from a school that has it to a school that doesn't?
We don't really have pure, of any sort, like feeder patterns, so it's very difficult to track that.
Because I think Stafford Middle, there's some that come up, but it's Stafford L, Burns,
Does Conway
and
go-
Winding
Sarah,
Creek
does Conway
would
go
be
to
the predominant
Stafford Middle?
feeder schools to Stafford Middle.
No, they all
I
go
don't
to,
think so.
they all go to Dixon Smith or Drew.
Based on the amount of funding we
Stafford
get
L-
through the grant, is there an
Stafford L has a
optimal
really
number
high
of schools that we should
population,
target,
too.
or
Based on
it's just too
population of
hard to
students.
calculate?
and I think that's something that we continue to look at, and we have a lot of conversation around what's gonna have the most impact, and how far do you go down? Do you kind of take away and, really continue to slice that pie and dwindle that money in terms of looking at your impact? And so that's, like Michael said earlier, you gotta draw a line somewhere, and that's as we've really been looking at that, talking with principals, talking with staff around what's gonna make the most impact, that's how we've arrived at this.
But we look at other
recommendation.
factors
Sure.
besides just.
Yes.
Well, you're basically taking Conway away to help make room for the middle schools, partially.
Well, not
Cause-
Ferry
cause
Farm
but for
and
that-
Burns.
Ferry Farm, well, Ferry Farm.
Ferry Farm, Burns, and Conway.
No, I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about the.
For Con one?
Well, no.
We're also trying to plan ahead in terms of
Yes.
trying to think about what redistricting decisions you're gonna make and what that looks for 18 and 19, because it
Yes.
does look like 18 and 19 will come on as
Both
Title
on,
I.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that's,
Gonna
we're trying to
further
plan 2 years ahead
dilute.
with this, right, in terms of
Right.
thinking about that, so that's
Which is
really-
another reason to really think about, do you really want, and I'm not advocating one way or the other, but do you really wanna add the middle schools this year, when you know next year you're gonna have two new, this time
three are
next
coming
year,
off.
you're gonna have two coming on.
2 coming on, but 3 coming off.
They don't come off right away though.
They, next year will be their last year.
That's why we built it
That's
in.
their
so it's
transition.
That's what the transition fund.
That's the kind of the,
But
I think the
we've
point of
been-
having this
so that's a
conversation, what
given.
seems early.
Yeah, but we've
If
also
you-
been
if you
debating
accept
about
this
adding the middle
recommendation.
schools.
With the
for a while.
principals who you've spoken with, all the principals that are on the sheet, right?
They're aware.
They're aware, but are you, like, was there any pushback? Were they arguing or upset?
So for
or-
example, and I don't wanna, so I have talked, so I'll talk about Moncur, I did have a conversation with Mr. Mackey just around what that means, cause I did look at that, alright, 99,000, like,
Mhm.
that's a big jump, and so him and I had that conversation around what he felt comfortable with, where he was he still able to meet the needs of the school, and him and I talked about some ideas, and he was comfortable with that, he understood the need to be able to reach a couple of our middle schools that really needed some support, and so we had that conversation in terms of where he was, cause I wanted to make sure, especially given that was one of
But
the
why
larger.
is he taking the biggest bite or loss?
Because
I
he has the most money.
Well, actually Conway is,
Well, but Conway's coming off, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious,
but
he's
they're on
staying
next
on.
year. The fact that they're coming off.
Yeah.
So there is a calculation.
To me, is a
It's-
so what, next year they have the same need that they have this year.
Right.
So the fact that they're coming off the year after that doesn't affect, for me, the decision about what they're gonna get for next year.
Gotcha.
So they would come, you're right, they would come off the following year. So yeah, it is a calculation. and
Now
you're-
Burns, I keep going back to Burns, where's Mrs. Sigmund, when I look at that free and reduced number and I see, you know, what was it, 39, I have a little less sympathy there, because they're on that list because of the multiplier.
And Burns is projected to be 23% free and reduced lunch in all 3 of your existing
Yeah.
redistricting plans. And so
But
that is
the-
one
the-
that we think we
Right,
would-
but the 39% free and reduced lunch isn't a true measure of how many free and reduced lunch kids are in that school, right? Because it's only the ones who filled out the form, but the CEP stuff is looking at the
Community.
community as a whole. So the 39, the free and reduced lunch number for CEP schools is meaningless.
But do we know what the CEP numbers are on all the schools? That would be interesting, I would have asked for that if I had known we had those numbers. Do we have the CEP numbers for every school? If we do, I'd like to see that, because
Yeah.
the only way you can compare it is to have it for every school, which is why, you know, I appreciate you sending that list, because that makes it helpful for me. But do we have the CEP?
We do have that number.
Can we get that for all the schools?
Yes.
Okay, you can just send it, I'm
But-
asking.
But when you're identifying for
That's
Title
right.
I, you cannot use a CEP number for a non-CEP
I'm
identifier.
talking about it informational for me to have in my background.
Just clarify.
You know.
Why would you have a CEP score if you're not a CEP school?
Well, because
Because you
you
calculate your
have to
score on April
calculate it to
1st.
figure out whether you're gonna make that school a CEP school.
Oh,
And
across
as we've
the
That
discussed.
determines how much federal reimbursement you get.
Right, and as we've discussed, there are CEP schools where, because the free and reduced lunch numbers are so high, you would lose money making them a CEP school, right? That was what we were
Yep.
hearing about
Yep.
Shirley Hine, that,
Which is a shame, because
And
they're the ones that
Stafford,
probably need it. You know, I really, I mean, I know we're not a business, but it makes me sad that we're not identifying schools as CEPs, because we're not gonna make as much money.
Well, no, it's
you know,
not gonna
on the
cover the
lunches.
cost. I mean, because the meal is only reimbursed in a percentage.
Well, don't get on the cost with me, because our nutrition pays for a lot of things that they don't have to pay for, because they cover a lot of costs. When we need hoods on the you know.
Dishwashers.
Things like that. Our school nutrition fund funds things that the school system should be paying for. At least it has traditionally. I don't know, I haven't seen any reports lately.
So
But
this
it's-
is only for Title I. Are we gonna bring these schools on for Title I? Then why do we constantly keep talking about the CEP?
Because the CEP has an impact. When you have a CEP multiplier, then we consider the CEP multiplier as well when we look at the Title I application.
So there's no CEP schools that are not on this list, right? By
Correct.
having that 1.6 multiplier, they're almost guaranteed to be on this
These are
list.
all of our CEP schools.
Right, so by
Okay.
definition,
The only one in the
Okay.
past that was not on our identified Title I list was Drew Middle.
Okay.
All right, is there anything else?
Nope.
So we are planning on bringing this to, we need action on it in June at the board meeting for, so that we can submit the application and so we can move forward.
and we'll get that
Yeah, but
information.
also
And I have
How to
the
see-
full,
Redistricting.
the two requests that I have is carryover funds for the past year and CEP
Past 3
calculation for all
years.
schools. 3 years.
Yeah.
And CEP calculation for schools,
For all the
for all
schools.
schools.
For
Because
this
I wanna
item,
see
we
where
also have
it
the
is.
staff.
And maybe we could also get the cost, if we have any general costs to make a school a CEP, for example, Stafford Middle at 49% free and reduced. Or Shirley High. Or Shirley High. How much would it cost us to make them CEP schools?
Cost to make them CEP.
Right, and that's the
You mean
25%.
to, you talking about to?
You'd
to-
actually be selling more lunches, so how much do we make on a breakfast or lunch?
So
And that's the factor that we go into, there's an
get a
estimate
certain
on what do we
amount of
think our overall participation will increase, is it gonna
Yes.
cover that 25 or
Yes,
30%
that's-
reduction?
right.
You're gonna take.
What would be the cost to us? Because I would like to have more of our schools be CEP if we can, because 2 reasons. One, it makes sure the kids get 2 meals, and 2, it means we're not gonna have any student meal debt for those schools.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna sit with it, because
We have to think on it, 'cause we will bring this back
Yeah, I
in
didn't know we
June,
weren't doing it, 'cause
and-
of those.
but like, this is all factored into,
So can we adjourn?
yes,
Okay, great.
let's adjourn.
Yeah, wait, one last piece though.
Oh, boy.
In order for us to prepare the application for June, we have to know the identification of schools and the threshold.
So we can't decide that till after we do the redistricting though, right? Or do we just, you just want us to set the threshold?
In the past, we've always, the board has gone with with
The
staff's recommendation,
Right.
and we put it into the Title I application
Not always.
and bring it to you
I
in June.
would say go with the recommendation, because I think that, you know, that 50% seems reasonable.
Are we pulling Susan, staff recommendation, different
Would
recommendation?
you feel indifferently if Shirley High were at 49 versus 50? I'm just curious.
It's not just the free and reduced lunch though. I think there's other factors that go into play in the Title I. And I think 50% is,
Well, what's the other factor? Why would you not, and obviously, it's not in my district, but I feel like we're shortchanging Stafford Middle.
it's the
What is
number
the
of-
other factor?
it's the number of ELL students, it's the number of SPED students.
Do you see that up there?
It's the number of, yeah, but those data.
But she knows that because it's in her district. You don't know
But it's
that.
also
Stafford
the
Middle.
fact
No.
that they are having a hard time staffing,
But you-
and it's just a school with different issues. Like I talk to principals that have different staffing issues all over the county.
And if this is something we can revisit every year, we
Right.
can do it every year.
I'm on staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Susan, are you staff recommendation? I'm only going down the road with Susan.
It's gonna get approved, don't worry about it, it'll be 6-1.
I don't know.
You got it. Are you dismissed?
We're dismissed. We're dismissed.
Back at 5.
We'll write it as recommended. Thank you.
Here.
Five.
Back at 5.